Chapter 273. Doomhammer. Unlike Ghoul Dan's humility, Zulud didn't bow, and Orgrim didn't mind either. After all, Zulud was a tribal chief, the leader of the Dragon Maw tribe. He was also a shaman, the only shaman who accompanied his tribe after coming to this world. Furthermore, Orgrim felt more comfortable talking to a typical beast man like him. It was because of the shaman's strange prophecy, or rather, the things he could provide that Orgrim was very interested in. "How's that going?" Doomhammer didn't bother with pleasantries and directly took the wine cup Zulud handed over. The wine inside was very good, and the human blood that flowed into the cup made it even more delicious. "It's done. Great Chief." Zulud opened his smelly mouth and let out a smile that seemed like a declaration of victory. "Take me to see it. Now. Immediately." Orgrim couldn't wait any longer. Of the two attacks, one was a complete defeat, and the other was a complete failure. Orgrim deeply felt the bottleneck of the beastmen. As the most knowledgeable beastman, and also the one with the highest position, Orgrim knew that the era of the beastmen conquering the world was over. "Understood. Please follow me." Zulud called for Orgrim to mount his warg. Not long after, they arrived at the southeast side of the wetlands. This place was called Grimbader, as the dwarves called it. It used to be a dwarven stronghold, but now it belonged to the Dragon Maw tribe. While the rooms in the dwarven stronghold were large enough for the dwarves, it wasn't friendly to most of the beastmen. Zulud had most of his tribesmen who had nothing better to do expand this place. The stronghold was well equipped, and it was built inside the mountains, making it easy to defend. This was very important because there was a killing machine here that could break through the damned defenses of the humans. Zulud brought the great chief and his guards deeper into the stronghold, and finally arrived in front of a large iron gate. One could imagine that behind the gate was a vast underground hall. "What's inside? You told me a few weeks ago that you sensed an incomparably powerful mysterious force that could change the entire situation. Is this thing inside now?" "Yes, my great chieftain. I hope the thing inside has that value." "Do you know? Zuluhid, for the sake of that illusory image of yours, I sent you 30,000 elite orcs as a search team and 100,000 laborers as excavators. If it weren't for you, I would have gone all out to attack Southshore. Now, if you disappoint me, I don't mind showing you the wrath of the great chief." Orgrim raised the hammer of destruction in his hand and made a threatening declaration. "You won't be disappointed, great chief." Zuluhid wrinkled his nose and revealed a rough smile. At this moment, one of Orgrim's guards tried to touch the handle of the gate. "Wait." The Dragon Maw tribe's chief issued a stern warning. He took out a strange thing from a large bag on his waist. It was a huge and ordinary-looking golden disc. He raised the disc high up in the air. "I am the master of Demon's Soul, and I order you to appear in the name of my master. Guardian." It was hard to tell if Zuluhid was using the shaman's power or not. In any case, in the eyes of the great tribal chief and the dozens of orc guards, they could only see countless sparks surging from the huge iron gate, gathering into a figure in the void in front of the iron gate. The figure gradually became clearer. It was a tall and strong humanoid figure wearing unfamiliar bone armor. Its top looked like a demon's skull that had lost its skin and flesh, but it was burning with flames. Its eyes were balls of black flames. This strange existence floated in front of them. It was as tall as the orcs, but it looked sluggish. It emitted an indescribable power and a sense of vigilance. "We want to go in," Zulud said as he raised the Demon's Soul in front of him and pointed at Orgrim and his guards. He was telling it that we included those creatures. The strange existence nodded, turned into countless sparks again, and disappeared in front of the gate. The Dragon Maw tribe's chief nodded to his great chief, indicating that they could enter. "What will happen if we barge in?" Orgrim asked. Very bad. That time, a messenger came with your message. He didn't wait for me to remove the guard before rushing in. Then, that guard appeared out of nowhere and grabbed that idiot's head with its huge, burning hand. Then, that idiot's head turned to ash. Orgrim could almost imagine a huge flaming claw grabbing the careless beastman's head, flames coming out of his orifices. A few seconds later, the beastman stopped screaming, and his body went limp as his head turned into a pile of ash. Fortunately, Zuluhid was a pure orc, and not a schemer like Ghoul Dan who made Orgrim uncomfortable all day long. Fortunately, Ghoul Dan was heavily injured. The huge iron gate opened with a squeak. Inside, there were dozens of heavy metal chains that had been heated red by the high temperature and were attached to the wall. Oddly enough, Orgrim thought that he would see a gigantic creature cramming the entire cave. In the end, at the end of the magical chain that got thinner and thinner as it got closer to the center of the room, was a human female. From the point of view of the entrance, her face was pressed against the ground, and she was lying on her side with her head facing the innermost part of the cave. She was wearing a crimson-red gauntlet and leggings with golden edges, and a sexy bikini battle armor. As a woman, she was very beautiful. She had a head of fiery red hair and a body that was incomparably seductive in the eyes of humans. He didn't know if it was because of comfort or despair, but Orgrim could clearly feel that she was actually awake, but she was lying there just like that. Orgrim was enraged. He pointed at the plump breasts and slender waist with his thick finger and cursed at Zuluhid, "You idiot, you're attracted by these shriveled breasts and slender waist? Bastard! I don't care which human queen or princess she is. Zuluhid, you're dead." At this moment, Zuluhid smiled mysteriously and knocked on the disc in his hand. In the next moment, the seemingly human woman and the chain rapidly grew in size together. A few seconds later, Orgrim recovered from his shock. Ha ha ha. Well done, Zuluhid. Chapter 274. The threat of the Horde had not disappeared. The Alliance and the Horde were like two giant beasts fighting to the death. They had to stop fighting in the face of the weather and lick their wounds. The refugees from the Stormwind Kingdom who were stranded in the Hillsbrad Hills received a batch of crucial summer food, but it was not enough, so Duke went to the Barav family for this. Duke did not see Duke Barav. The Duke had gone to Alterac. Unexpectedly, Janice, who met Duque on behalf of the Duke, agreed to Duque's request to buy rations. No problem. The people of Stormwind have made outstanding contributions to the resistance against the Horde. It is only right for the Barav family to do something for them. How about 10,000 tons of wheat this year? According to the previous price. This time, it was Duque's turn to be surprised. 5,000 tons back then was a 30% premium. According to the previous price, it sounded like the Barav family was still a scam. But this was not the time. The battle in South Shore made the entire northern continent realize that the threat of the orcs was close at hand. Those terrifying green-skinned beasts wanted to slaughter all the humans in the world. As a result, the price of everything related to the people's lives soared. Even if the Alliance used a great victory to prove that they had the ability to defeat the Horde invasion. The various kingdoms also introduced a lot of policies to suppress the skyrocketing prices, but the most important thing was that the price of grain still increased by more than 2.5 times. Selling at the previous price wasn't a scam, it was a huge sale. Duque was moved, this really. I thank you on behalf of the people of Stormwind. No need to thank me. Helping the people of Stormwind is helping the Alliance and Alterac. The Duchess smiled kindly. Yes, I heard that your private army's equipment isn't enough. Is there anything the Barav family can help with? In a state of war, the price of weapons, food, soldiers, and everything related to war soared. Duque's luxury goods business had long been stagnant. If it wasn't for the fact that he had gathered enough weapons and equipment before the war, Duque's so-called private army would have to be equipped with a bamboo spear. Of course, everyone lacked weapons, especially after losing their own country. Even if Duque opened a blacksmith shop in the refugee camp north of South Shore, workers and raw materials were still scarce. Obviously, the Barav family did not lack these things. I'll be honest with you. Whether it's Stormwind or my private army, they all need it. May I ask, what do I have to pay for this? Mrs. Janice, Duke asked politely. As a testament to the friendship between the Barav family and the Marcus family, these small gifts are not worth mentioning. If I must say what I personally wish for, could I ask you, Duque, to teach my daughter the secret of multicast? Duque was stunned, then he smiled. The best way to deepen the relationship between nobles was through marriage. Mrs. Janice was very clever. If it was the Duque of the past, a duke and a duke's daughter would definitely be a good match. Now, Duque was the rising star of the Rotterdam Alliance, the Alliance's deputy commander, and he had saved 5 kings and won the Battle of South Shore. Duque was almost synonymous with miracles. Princess Kalia of Rotterdam and many other princesses were almost at Duque's disposal. If he proposed a marriage, it would only be humiliating for the Barav family. On the other hand, the Barav family urgently needed a backup. Alterac was too weak. Even if they entered a state of war, the entire Alterac family only had a little more than 30,000 soldiers, including 20,000 farmers. These farmers who had just washed their feet and started working in the fields were completely useless in terms of morale and training. Putting aside the ambitious Rotterdam Kingdom, the wandering Stormwind Kingdom was an ideal partner to work with. Perhaps the refugees of Stormwind would stay near South Shore for a long time, but as long as the 7 human kingdoms still existed, and as long as the Alliance existed, Stormwind would definitely not dare to take the risk of being criticized by the world and covet Alterac's land. In a roundabout way to save the country, the Barav family proposed to let Wuxia become Duque's disciple. In Azeroth, although there was no saying that a teacher for a day was a father for life, the relationship between a teacher and a student was still very important. If it wasn't for national righteousness, or the rise and fall of a country, it would be shameful for the entire human kingdom to betray and kill one's teacher. Even if it was in the name of righteousness, it was not something to be proud of. This was also why in the original history, Khadgar was criticized by many for killing Medivh for the sake of the world. Duque thought for a while. I now have the responsibility of the Alliance's deputy commander. I may not have much time to teach Miss Wuxia. At this point, Duchess Janice was so nervous that her heart almost jumped out of her throat. This was how relationships were. If one did not advance, they would fall back. It was very difficult to maintain a stalemate. Moreover, Stormwind had already gained a foothold. The Barav family, which was weaker in terms of military strength, needed help from Duque and Stormwind in order to deal with the threat of the orcs. Things were different now. The current Duque and Stormwind could completely ignore Alterac and the Barav family. Not befriending the Barav family would do Duque no good, nor would it do him any harm. If he considered the destruction of the Barav family in the future, Duque really did not need to save this family. At this moment, the faces of the undead Janice and Wuxia from Scholomance that appeared in Duque's mind overlapped with the Janice in front of him. For some reason, he suddenly sympathized with the Barav family. He had fought for so long just so that he would not become a ghoul. It was as if Duque could see the Wuxia Barav of the future, standing among a group of necromancers. Even though her family was not far away, she could only wait for the Lich King to summon her to the holy land of the undead scourge. Mrs. Janice dissected the corpses one after another. At that time, she was no longer the elegant and beautiful mistress of the Barav family. In her crazy eyes, those soulless zombies were her only friends. Since the start of the First War, too many kingdoms and families had been destroyed by the 3 consecutive wars. Duque was not a savior. He could not save everyone. However, since this tragedy was happening right in front of his eyes, he might as well save them. Thinking of this, Duque changed the topic. However, if the Barov family does not mind, I am willing to discuss the mysteries of magic with Miss Wuxia. At this moment, Janice finally let out a sigh of relief. Chapter 275. For Duque, it was just a convenience, but for the Barov family, it had a completely different meaning. As if seeing through what Duque wanted the most, after confirming their close alliance, Lady Janice threw out her ultimate trump card. It's Wuxia's honor to study the mysteries of magic with you, Duque. I'll write a letter now. Please pass it to Wuxia when you go to the Dalajan. Oh? Duque was curious. Madam, you know that I'm going to the Dalajan? Lady Janice showed a proud expression. I heard that you used ice spells to kill more than a dozen powerful orc assassins in the command center and saved 4 kings. Duque tilted his head. That's right. I only know that if it was my senior brother Antonidas, even when he was still a sky mage, he would not have let the last assassin break through his ice domain. Even if he was the chief of a tribe. Why do you say that? Although he had guessed Janice's intentions, Duque still asked. Because at that time, he had a top-level, ice circuit, model more than you did. Lady Janice smiled like a flower, and her posture as she took a sip of black tea was extremely elegant. Duque seemed to see an equally elegant fox tail wagging behind her. This was where Janice was smart. From the perspective of forming an alliance or deepening friendship, the conditions she gave Duque before could not be considered generous or costly. She and the Barov family certainly hoped to have Duque as external aid, but at this time, it seemed that the Barov family did not necessarily need Duque's support. To some extent, this was also a test. If Duque refused, then naturally, the top-level, ice circuit, model would not have anything to do with Duque. If Duque agreed like this, it would be a pleasant surprise. Janice did not add this bargaining chip when she made the request, because she did not want this to become a pure transaction. In exchange for the Barov family's gift, he wouldn't help the Barov family at a critical moment. After figuring this out, Duque didn't have any ill feelings towards Janice. This kind of, if you respect me, I'll respect you tenfold, method. Duque didn't hate it. Moreover, Lady Janice was smart enough to figure out what he wanted. She was indeed quite intelligent. I told senior brother Antonidas long ago that I wanted him to pass the ice circuit to Wuxia. As half of Wuxia's master, I think you, Duque, should help Wuxia with her research. Janice summoned her servant and wrote a letter in her own handwriting, handing it to Duque. Thank you so much, madam. Just like that, Duque brought Janice's handwritten letter to the Dalajan. It was different from the last time he came in the middle of the night. This time, although Duque took advantage of this rare free time to pay a visit of a more personal nature, Duque's status was completely different now. Previously, Duque's magic had not been proven to the 5 northern countries. Now, Duque was a big shot who had truly secured the position of the deputy commander of the alliance. Therefore, the person who led the team to receive Duque was Prince Kale, that's, one of the 6-member council members who remained in the Dalajan. Welcome, Commander Marcus. At this time, Kale, that's was still the role model of the High Elf. He was gentle and elegant, and he gave off a feeling of a spring breeze to anyone he met. Moreover, he deliberately hid the word deputy to make him appear more mature. Everyone liked to be flattered. Kale, that's a name, which seemed to have slipped out, was actually a slightly exaggerated compliment. Hee, when you say that, I almost think that Commander Lothar is here, Duque replied without a trace. There's no need to be humble. Everyone knows your contributions to the alliance. Seeing that Duque was not snubbed, Kale, that's did not deliberately sow discord between Duque and Lothar. He changed the topic and said, actually, many mages in the Dalajan are fascinated by your spellcasting skills. If you have time to come to the Dalajan to teach or hold seminars, I'm sure many mages will join the royal mages in Stormwind because of your reputation. Oh. It's not good for me to poach mages in the Dalajan like this, right? Duque was slightly tempted. In the Dalajan, all mages are equal and free. Mystics pay attention to fair trade. In order to explore a more profound world of magic, so what if I give up a moment of freedom? Just as everyone can freely choose whether to join the Dalajan's direct mages, the Dalajan will not mind free mages joining Stormwind or becoming your followers, Your Excellency. How about it? Do you want to consider it? If Kale, that's flattery at the beginning had gone too far, then this time, Kale, that's proposal could be said to be a tailor-made and wonderful proposal. It immediately touched Duque's heart. Abducting mages for free. He did not need to cultivate them himself. He could just take away a semi-finished product and train them himself for a year and a half. When the time came, even if they were not flashy enough, they could still be scary. Duque was really tempted. This time, Duque was sincerely grateful to Kale, that's Kai. Sorry, Kale, that's, thank you very much. I think I'll find some time. Before that, I want to see Antonidas first. Please follow me. Kale, that's finally confirmed that he had redeemed the little bit of unhappiness at the beginning and had successfully gained Duque's favor. It was reasonable to say that as the Prince of the High Elves, Kale, that's could completely ignore Duque on the surface. But one should not forget why Kale, that's had come to the Dalajan to study and then stayed for so many years. He could not return to Kuel Salis even though he was about to go moldy. The story behind this was the power struggle between his father, the Sun King, and the Silvermoon Council. Having seen the customs of the two worlds, Kale, that's had long become extremely mature. In particular, there was no harm in having a good relationship with Duque, the powerful deputy commander of the Alliance. Moreover, he and Duque also had a strange sense of closeness. It was a kind of closeness that seemed to come from the same source. Walking on the streets of the Dalajan, Duque felt very strange. This was a Dalajan that had not been destroyed. Although it was not as wonderful as the Dalajan that floated in the air in the future and was known as the City in the Sky. Now, this Dalajan was even bigger and more historical. This wonderful city located south of Lake Lordamir was a combination of wisdom, power, grandeur, beauty, art, and mystery. It was the brightest pearl of the entire continent and even the entire world. Once, almost all the human mages in the world studied the magic they learned from the High Elves here. And the mysterious and elegant white towers all over the city showed the wisdom, ambition, status, and power of the mages. If Duque had not inherited Karazhan, perhaps Duque would have considered building a mage tower here. As Kale, that's led the way, he introduced everything here to Duque. At this moment, a very beautiful blonde girl came in front of Duque. Hello, Your Excellency Sky Mage Duke Marcus. I am Jaina Proudmoore. Chapter 276. In the world of Azeroth, there were two heroines that no one could avoid. The Alliance's Jaina. The Horde Sylvanas. In the world's crisis after crisis, the two of them may not have played the most important role, but in every event, they were indispensable. Duque had mixed feelings about Jaina. Perhaps in the future, Jaina would still walk on the path that seemed to be destined to be difficult. She would watch her rumored boyfriends die one by one, watch the entire northern continent be destroyed by the Scourge army and forced to move west to the Kalimdor continent. In order to deal with a greater threat, to ensure peace with the Horde, she would be forced to commit patricide. She would continue to go astray in every attack. In the end, Theramore, which she had managed for half her life, was flattened by an Azeroth nuclear bomb. Everyone who trusted and supported her was killed, and her hair turned white overnight. She became the evil Jaina who did everything for the Black Horde and didn't care about the current situation. If that was the case, Jaina would undoubtedly have a serious conflict with Duque, who was a supremacist of the Alliance. But at this moment, Jaina was still a 12-year-old lowly. She had a delicate face that seemed to be carved by God. She had a small chin, clear blue eyes, soft blonde hair that just passed her shoulders, and a curvaceous body that had yet to fully develop. She was a classic beauty that was off the charts. Sai, 12 years old. Before Duque's transmigration, this was the age where he would have to be punished. Perhaps she already had a lot of thoughts of love and peace in her heart, but it was only at the level of a young girl's fantasy. Perhaps she would still become the Holy Mother in the future, but at this moment, she was still a 12-year-old girl. Loli had 3 good things. No. Actually, with Duque's current status in the Jianhu, he was not inferior to Jaina at all. In other words, if Duque wanted to, he could totally adopt Jaina, change her name to Bailey, and teach her what it meant to be an Onibaba. Cough cough. You must be joking. Duque was not such a person. He had always believed in his own integrity. Look, if necessary, he could loudly declare 3 times without hesitation. I'm not a Lulakan. I'm not a Lulakan. I'm a Lulakan. There seems to be something wrong with the 3rd time. Forget it, in life, there are as many troubles as the stars in the sky, don't mind these small details. Kale, could not help but smile when he saw that Duque was stunned after seeing Jaina. He suddenly remembered that the all-powerful deputy commander of the Alliance who had killed more than 200,000 orcs twice was actually just a 15-year-old boy. Miss Jaina is indeed the masterpiece of the gods. She is one of the 2 most beautiful girls in Dalaran. Jaina's face immediately turned red when she heard Kale, who was handsome and didn't show any signs of being corrupted at all. Kale's, that is. Kale was. Looking at her beautiful face, Duke suddenly understood why Arthas and Kale, were infatuated with Jaina. Duke smiled and nodded slightly. Praise your beauty, Miss Proudmoore. Although I would like to use magic to show my respect to you, this is Dalajan. I'd better not embarrass myself in front of everyone. Jaina was a little disappointed after hearing Duque's words. Everyone knew about Duque's impressive achievements, but Duque was not famous for his status and achievements. Instead, he was famous for his gorgeous magic tricks to please beautiful women. In Lordaeron, Duke used a beautiful rose of ice and fire to praise Princess Kalia Menethil of Lordaeron. In Southshore, Duque had used an illusory ice crystal rainbow divine song, Ode to Joy, to promote Aurelia Windrunner's beauty to the point that almost everyone in the Alliance knew. Men worshipped heroes' invincible and unparalleled achievements. Women, on the other hand, loved heroes' gorgeous tricks. Duque did not know that there was a widely acknowledged saying among the upper-class ladies, only those who had been praised by Duque with the most dazzling magic were truly stunning beauties. Firstly, she was quite confident in her beauty. Secondly, Jaina wanted to see what kind of hero this man, who had been repeatedly recruited by her father and almost became Kurtira's horse, was. Now that Duque had refused to help, Jaina's disappointment could be imagined. Unexpectedly, Kai Z started to make a fuss. Duque, that's not very kind of you, is it? I also know that Her Highness Kalia and Lady Aurelia are rare beauties in the world. Could it be that our Dalajan Princess Jaina is not as beautiful as them? Kale, put his hands on his hips, looking as if he was going to stand up for his Dalajan. This made it difficult for Duque to step down. Duque smiled bitterly. In the ordinary areas of the Dalajan, isn't it not allowed to cast spells casually? Kale, gently stroked his shoulder. I guarantee it with my identity. Damn it, I almost forgot that Kai Z is a member of the Kirin Tor 6-member council. Jaina did not speak, but she stared at Duque with her starry eyes full of anticipation. This was like chasing an old sow up a tree and then playing dumb pig jumping. Duque hated being forced, so he had an unspeakable evil purpose. Duque raised his hand. All right, for Lady Jaina's beauty. Under Jaina's expectant gaze, Kale, that's and the other curious onlookers, and under the gaze of Duque's guard, Gavin Rad, and his maid, Vanessa, Duque made his move. The immature ice circuit circulated, but with the help of the system, Duque created the most perfect fantasy effect. A huge ice crystal box appeared around Jaina. To be precise, it was this beautiful, almost transparent ice crystal box that contained Jaina. A box made of ice. Many Dalajan Morning Star mages could do it. What they couldn't do was obviously the incomparably intricate composition of the sound tube, soundboard, gears, springs, dampers, and other components inside. Although Kale, that's immediately sensed that the composition of this big box was incomparably complicated, as a magical genius and mechanical idiot, Kale, that's would never have guessed that it was a music box. 2 hands of magic gently twisted the springs on the big box. 2 beautiful ice crystal sculptures on the box began to spin and dance, 1 male and 1 female. The simple rotation was accompanied by a dazzling stream of light. And the foreign music that sounded from the music box easily evoked Jaina's beautiful memories of the past. She even felt a little nostalgic and fell into a dreamy imagination. No one thought that Duque could actually solidify abstract music into tangible magical artwork. It was simply a miracle. The sound made Jaina intoxicated. Well, if this music score could be composed with lyrics, it would be, "Ignore me, I'm a peddler, it's only natural for me to be worn down." Chapter 277. Duque turned his head and threw Jaina to the back of his mind. There were many people and many things that could not be touched at this time. Just like Kel Thuzad. When he saw this sinister guy, Duque wanted to cover his head and smash it with a brick. Finally, he could destroy his soul so that he could not even be a lich in the future. Unfortunately, he could not. He was one of the 6 members of the Kirin Tor Parliament. If he killed him, it would be tearing apart the alliance and even starting a war with the Dalajan. Moreover, Kel Thuzad was only a second-rate character. If he really wanted to make a move, it would be towards the first rate. For example, he could get rid of the guy next to him and get a phoenix mount or something. Well, Duque's thoughts had gone astray. In fact, Duque respectfully paid a visit to Antonidas, who was recuperating from his injuries. The old man looked very energetic. He was not even lying on the bed. Duque met Antonidas in his laboratory. If Duque had not repeatedly confirmed that Kale, was leading the way and that Duque, who could be resurrected, was not afraid of being shot in the back, Duque would definitely have suspected that Antonidas was a part-time dark warlock. The hall was very large and very dark. It was not because the lighting was not good, or because Antonidas had some kind of mental illness that made him like to hide in the dark and quietly enjoy the peace. It was because the air in the entire hall was filled with a large amount of dark energy. Even though Antonidas had already summoned a few bishops of the Church of the Holy Light to continuously purify the evil energy with holy light, the evil aura that came out of the hall did not stop. "Master Antonidas, is your curse still not healed?" Old Antonidas used a golden translucent cover to cover the thing and then replied to Duque, "What? Curse? That thing has long been shaved to the limit by Archbishop Fail. I was worried that His Excellency the Archbishop was too powerful and destroyed that thing, so I couldn't study it. That's why the Archbishop left a little." Duque was dumbfounded. He saw that Antonidas had used a mysterious method to separate the curse that was almost branded on his soul and place it in a mirror image of himself for magic research. "Doesn't it hurt when your soul is separated?" Duque asked. Soul separation was definitely 100 or 1,000 times more painful than someone using a saw to slowly cut off your hand. Duque didn't know how Antonidas had done it. The white-haired old mage stroked his beard. "There are some things that you'll get used to after doing it too many times. For the sake of research, this was nothing. Besides, aren't you also using soul separation? I've heard about your demonstration against King Eden. You didn't leave a trace of your soul in the mirror image, so how could you perform such precise operations? Your mirror image avatar was destroyed by that sword saint. You must be in pain, right? Seeing Duque's expression as he recalled the pain, Antonidas thought that he had guessed correctly. It hurts a little, Duque answered honestly. A perfect misunderstanding. Duque's mirror image avatar really wasn't controlled with his soul. However, being stabbed by the Fireblade clan's chief, Dal, with his triple blood blade was truly painful. The system genie didn't detect his existence at all, and the protective shield that the system genie had released for him in a fraction of a second was unable to block it. As for Duque himself, because he hadn't mastered the ice circuit, he didn't have the ice barrier that was commonly known as a refrigerator. After coming to the world of Azeroth, Duque realized that spells or skills that could give you a short period of invincibility and protect you from any damage were not easy to obtain. The invincibility of a holy knight had to be truly recognized by the holy light. Similarly, the mage's ice barrier was the same. Of course, Duque could make ordinary ice. But in the face of absolute attack power, the hardness of ice was just a joke. To achieve that temporary invincibility, it was already close to the realm of domain power. For this, a top-grade ice circuit was indispensable. Otherwise, even if he learned it, it would only be a weakened version of ice barrier that only gave 2 or 3 seconds of invincibility. How could Duque bear this? At critical times, 1 extra second was life. Oh, no, that was moral integrity. Either he didn't learn it, or he learned the best. Did you come here to see if this old man can still fight? Alright, I was wrong. I shouldn't have abandoned my duties to the Alliance and secretly come here to do research. The next time that Ghoul Dan comes, I promise I'll take action. Of course, it's also fine if it's someone of that level. Antonidas stuffed a magic beacon into Duque's palm. Activate the beacon. I'll be there in a minute. Duque was a little speechless, but after thinking about it, it made sense. As the dignified Dalajan chairman, he definitely wouldn't need him to take action against any random enemy. The fact that he was willing to come at his beck and call was already giving him a lot of face. Besides, a Breaking Dawn mage who could teleport to any place on the continent at any time really had the capital to be willful. Duque didn't have much to say. Antonidas looked at Duque, who refused to leave, and blinked. Is there something? Or do you also want to study this unknown mysterious curse? Why don't you be my assistant? I'm very interested in how you use Hand of Magic. I can give you the treatment of a morning rank assistant. Duque was embarrassed. He scratched his head. Duque still took out the letter that Lady Janice wanted him to send to Antonidas. Actually, Lady Janice asked me to give you a letter. Seeing the fire seal on the letter and the unique magical security method that lingered on the envelope, Antonidas, this old man, blushed slightly. He took the envelope with both hands, opened it impatiently, and then, the old man's face collapsed. It was an expression of laughter and anger. Antonidas seemed to want to get angry, but he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. In the end, he gave in. The ice circuit model, right? That little girl really knows how to extort. Alright, it's my fault. This reason barely makes sense. Alright, here you go. Antonidas waved his right index finger over his temple. Duque suddenly saw a series of mysterious, ice-blue magic runes appear on his temple. The continuous runes formed a small ribbon that wrapped around Antonidas' index and middle fingers. Antonidas then handed this rune ribbon to Duque. When Duque once again saw that familiar yet strange three-dimensional magic model enter his mind, Duque was so excited that he almost kissed Antonidas. System notification: congratulations, host. You have obtained the Breaking Dawn magic circuit model, Ice Crown. This is a magic circuit model that Breaking Dawn Archmage Antonidas has continuously modified and optimized for 30 years. After comparing it with Anastrian Sunstrider's Arcane Fire circuit, the circuit has no flaws. The circuit model is rated as S, perfect. It can increase the ability of the Ice Magic circuit by 108 times or more. It is recommended to practice it immediately. Chapter 278. 108 times. It sounded exaggerated, but in fact, it was because the ice circuit that Duque had created himself was too lousy. The magic model that he had casually found in Karazhan's library was definitely something that Duque had no choice but to do. Fortunately, rebuilding the magic circuit was not as troublesome as cultivating meridians like in the Wuxia novels that Duque had read before he transmigrated. Although the magic circuit was an important source of magic power for mages to cast spells, the magic circuit could be modified or even transplanted. The ice circuit was a bit like installing an air conditioner in the body. To put it simply, as long as there was a channel to continuously transport the heat away from the body, the effect of cooling could be achieved. To make it more complicated, all sorts of things were needed, such as filtering the air that was sucked into the air conditioner, mixing it with the fresh air outside, cooling it down, and then transporting it back to the place where it was needed. The same was true for the top-notch ice circuit. Compared to the ordinary ice circuit, the Crown of Ice was undoubtedly much better. First of all, the number of elemental planes that could be connected at the same time could theoretically reach up to 128, and the number of suction points that could absorb ice elements from the atmosphere was 256. The ordinary version had 3 planes and 12 suction points. Secondly, it was stability and anti-interference. The ordinary version had only one connection method, and if it was broken, it was broken. The Crown of Ice had multiple threads that were connected at different frequencies at the same time. If a few were broken, others could be added. Then there was coordination. Antonida's advanced product had designed a magic circuit array that could mix the ice elements of various elemental planes with different output per unit of time, and finally turn them into a unified flow that would be injected into the next level of the circuit system. Finally, there was filtering. The Crown of Ice would automatically determine the purity of the ice elements in the circuit based on the physical condition of the owner. The more impure ice elements that were brushed down would gather over to the Arcane Fire circuit, and fuse with the elements brushed down from the Arcane Fire circuit to form a new spell, Chaotic Frostfire Missile. This kind of magic attack composed of impurities could not attack stronger spellcasters, but it would have unexpected effects against some creatures with extraordinary self-healing abilities. After reading the introduction of the Crown of Ice magic circuit, Duque was indescribably happy. However, it was necessary to be wary of others. This was the Dalajan's territory, so of course, Duque would not practice the Crown of Ice here. Looks like I'll have to find a time to go back to the Karazhan. Just as Duque was about to bid farewell to Antonidas, Duque's meddlesome system elf helped him scan the contents of the letter. On it was written, "Dear senior brother, it's time to return the favor you owe me. Give the Crown of Frost to Duque. I hope that he can help me take care of my precious daughter, Wuxia. You can't refuse. Otherwise, I'll expose the fact that you peeped on me while I was bathing 20 years ago." It was signed, "Your most beloved junior sister, Janice." Duque was really blind. He seemed to have discovered some secret about how messy the circle of rich people was. But seeing that Janice still maintained her beauty at this age, it was obvious that Janice must have been a great beauty when she was young. But 20 years ago, Antonidas would have been close to 60 years old. Alright, this guy was really an old pervert. Duque pretended not to see such gossip. Anyway, Duque said goodbye to Antonidas with a straight face. When he came out, he was surprised to find that Kale, was still waiting for him. Your Highness, you. Duque had wanted to say, "You're so free," but he changed his words. I'm really ashamed that you've waited for me for so long. The High Elf Prince was as dazzling as ever. His white teeth could be used in a toothpaste advertisement, and his golden hair could be used in a shampoo advertisement. Before Duque's transmigration, he would definitely be a national-level handsome. Alright, Duque was being modest, but in reality, Duque was jealous. Kale, that's smile was as amiable as ever. I'm the one who should be ashamed. I've seen a lot of magic messages and magic images. I also think that the existence of the orcs is a nightmare for the entire world of Azeroth. Whether I'm a part of the continent or a part of Kirin Tor, should participate in the war. Unfortunately, no one can escape from their origins. Since I can't go to the battlefield, I can only help you in this way. Because this is also helping the Alliance. Duque suddenly sighed. Kale, that was indeed a good young man. If not for the series of tragedies and conspiracies surrounding him in his later life, he would definitely be the kind of person who was a good student when he was young, one of the top 10 outstanding youths when he grew up, and an idol like him when he was older. Alright, Duque took back the idea of killing this guy and making him drop a phoenix or something. For now, thank you for your help, Your Highness. If possible, I hope you can call me Kale, and I also hope to be able to call you Duque. Alright, Kale, Duque, is there anything else you want to do? Could you help me find Miss Alicia Barev? She seems to still be in class. I can get someone to inform her. However, I know a good place to drink tea and chat while waiting for Miss Barev. Good idea. What Kale said was indeed a good place. Duque didn't know how to describe this place. Generally speaking, this hotel, called the Magic Hotel, had functions of dining, entertainment, and gatherings. This hotel next to the Dalajan Central Square was more like an elegant salon. Sitting in a private room on the second floor of the hotel, looking at the same purple brick pattern under his feet, and then looking at the purple houses in the distance, it really had a different flavor. This was the Dalajan city before it was destroyed. This Dalajan city could be said to be of the same architectural style as the Sky City that floated in the sky in the future. Most of them were purple torch-like pillars or towers, fire-shaped or circular roofs, with torch-like golden edges and long white pillars below. It looked a bit like the Middle Eastern architectural style before Duque transmigrated. Sipping the faint red wine, he looked at the mages and magic apprentices coming and going below. Duque listened attentively. Almost everyone was talking about magic or magic-related things. There was almost no topic about the orcs. It was completely impossible to see that the dark clouds of war had enveloped the entire northern continent. Very peaceful, isn't it? Kale, asked. Yes. I don't feel the aura of war. In fact, it still has an impact. Because of the advent of war, in July, the entire kingdom has changed 70% of the fields that were originally used to grow magic materials to grow food. At the same time, the parliament has announced that any high-consumption or high-risk experiments are prohibited. All battle mages have cancelled their holidays and changed to be on standby 24 hours. Sigh, war is really too terrifying. If this kind of war continues for a few years, I really can't imagine what will happen to the Dalajan. Chapter 279. Hey, Duque, how long do you think this war is going to last? Kale, asked. Duke smiled faintly. Are you asking another friend in a casual conversation as a friend? Or are you asking the deputy commander of the Alliance as an official? Kale, smiled faintly. Friends. That's simple. It depends on how many more neutral forces the reckless beast men will provoke. The more they provoke, the faster the beast men will be destroyed. Oh. Don't be fooled by the fact that the Alliance has united 8 kingdoms to fight against the Horde. In fact, there are still many neutral forces that haven't participated in the war, Duque said. For example? For example, the goblins in the southernmost Stranglethorn Vale, the wild hammer dwarves in the hinterlands, or the northernmost Kuel Salis. At this point, Kale, that's couldn't help but sigh. He then raised his head. What if we maintain the status quo? That depends on how long the Iron Stove Castle's bronze-bearded dwarves can last. If they are destroyed before the Alliance's counterattack, then it's very likely that this will become a long-lasting confrontation between the two continents of the Eastern Kingdom. It's not impossible for a war to break out for 100 years. Kale, that's expression turned ugly. What if all these forces join the war against the Horde? Duque raised a finger. Within a year, the Horde will definitely be defeated. This is the best news I've heard recently. A melodious voice came from the door of the private room. Two beautiful women appeared at the door. The one who spoke was naturally Jaina, who had a good impression of Duque. Jaina, who had just received praise from Duque and the envy of countless female Dalajan mage apprentices, had no idea that this was Duque's bad idea. Jaina's impression of Duque was not low. Of course, it was much lower than that of a certain Prince of Lordaeron. Jaina, who had changed into a blue magic robe, bowed to Duque like a lady. Lord Marcus, we meet again. Jaina was in a good mood. Her face was full of sunshine, as though the haze of war had been dispelled by her smile. The other was the person Duque was waiting for, the eldest daughter of the Berev family, Luxia Berev, who was only 15 years old. It was obvious that Luxia had inherited her mother's beauty. No, she was even more beautiful than Duchess Janice. Interestingly, Luxia's appearance was more in line with the Eastern aesthetic. Her skin was white and exquisite, sparkling and translucent like carved ivory jade. Her beautiful black hair was parted in the middle, obediently falling from her ears to her chest. On her forehead, there was a beautiful silver hair ornament, inlaid with a sparkling sapphire. She did not have any makeup applied on her delicate and pretty little face. Under her long and thin eyebrows, a pair of fan-like eyelashes were embedded with a pair of ice-blue eyes that were as enchanting as the autumn waters. Her eyebrows were curved like willow leaves, and her nose was straight and beautiful. The wings of her nose seemed to be flaring slightly. Below her elegant nose was a small cherry mouth. Although she did not wear lipstick, she looked brighter and more attractive than those who did. Her well-defined lips were rosy, like ripe cherries ready to be picked at any time. Even though she was wearing a loose mage robe, it was not difficult to see that she had the golden ratio of a figure. Her waist was slender but not too round. She was as perfect as a model. She was quite a beauty. In fact, in terms of appearance, Luxia was definitely not inferior to the beauties Duque had seen, such as Princess Kalia or Aurelia. She was even slightly better than Jaina, who had yet to fully develop her body. If there was anything that Luxia did not compare to them, it would be temperament. The impression that Princess Kalia gave Duque was that she was noble and kind. Aurelia was a mixture of the wildness of a ranger and the elegance of a high elf. Jaina was intelligent and extremely confident. As for Luxia, although the Berev family was also a high-ranking noble family, it could be seen that Luxia had also received an extremely good upbringing. However, Luxia looked more docile. As soon as she saw Duque, she almost hurriedly looked Duque up and down. Luxia gave up on looking at Duque. She lowered her eyelids and slightly lowered her head, which was also a very standard ladylike etiquette. Greetings, Duke Marcus. I am Luxia Berev. Her timid voice made people want to bully her, or to protect her. Duque secretly sighed in his heart. With such a temperament, Luxia was destined to be a good marriage partner and a good wife for a man. However, Luxia would definitely not be a heroine like Aurelia. Luxia, I believe your mother has already sent someone to inform you of the details? Duque asked. Yes. In fact, it was my mother who personally used a magic message to tell me. Duque pondered for a moment in his heart. That makes things easier. Right now, I am essentially just a sky wizard. It doesn't seem right for me to teach a peak earth wizard like you. You can be my assistant for now. After I pass this winter and advance to a morning star wizard, we can confirm our relationship. Alright. Duque still did not know that his words had already set off a storm in Kale, that's and Jaina's hearts. How could a morning star wizard be promoted so easily? At the level of a morning star wizard, one could already be addressed as a master. Further up, at the level of Radiant Moon, they were existences as rare as phoenix feathers and Qilin horns. Usually, wizards of this level were big shots. For example, people like Kale that's, Krasis and Kel Thuzad could easily become dukes or princes, regardless of their origins. There were only 2 breaking dawns in the entire world. When Duque said he wanted to advance, he did it as easily as if he was eating and drinking. If it were anyone else, they would definitely be treated as a braggart. However, he was Duque, a man who had tricked more than 200,000 orcs twice and burned half of the elven forest. When the Kirin Tor assembly had summoned Duque for a discussion, Kale that's had a very deep impression of Duque. Duque did everything with complete confidence, as if nothing in the world could escape his predictions. It was as if a man like him rarely boasted, and there was no need for him to use such deceptive methods to lie about such matters. If Duque dared to say something like this, it would only mean that Duque was 100% confident. One had to know that Duque would only be 16 next year. A 16-year-old morning star wizard? If not for Duque's status as the Alliance's deputy commander and his glorious achievements, this alone would have made Duque the most dazzling star in the world of wizards. Chapter 280. Kale that's also believed that he was talented, but his speed of leveling up was far slower than Duque's. The power he had today was built with the long lives of the High Elves. Kale that's heart rippled, and Jaina, who still had the temperament of a little girl, jumped up and down excitedly, congratulating Duque. Elusia's expression was a little complicated. She did not know how to describe the relationship between her and Duque, which seemed to be close, but in fact did not have much to do with each other. She could only congratulate Duque lightly. In the Berev family, Elusia felt suffocated. The noble Berev family was a typical aristocratic family. Her father, Arikos, had extraordinary means and abilities, and had unparalleled influence in the entire Alterac kingdom. However, he was very cold when it came to kinship. He had almost no time to care for his children. Her mother was a mage, busy with all kinds of experiments, and similarly did not have much time to care for her children. Elusia's 2 younger brothers, Wilton and Alex, were like 2 sharks in their mother's womb. At a young age, they had already begun to fight incessantly, openly and secretly, for the position of the next Berev family leader. Escaping to the Dalajan was the best solution Elusia could think of. However, she knew that she could not escape from the Berev family. Unmarried women of the nobility had always been important political bargaining chips. Perhaps only when she was married off by the family, would she be able to relax a little from the family's strangle-like control. The only thing that was fortunate was that although her father did not care about her, he had never given her any shortage of funds for her expenses and magic experiments. Today, it seemed to be a little different. Elusia knew that her fate would be linked to the man in front of her for a long time, who looked like a big boy, named Duque. Kale, I'm not familiar with the Dalajan, but since you said that as long as you are a mage, you can attend classes in the Dalajan, publish papers, or do all kinds of things related to your identity as a mage to expand your influence. I happen to have time, so I'll give a few public classes. Kale, eyes lit up when he heard this. Oh. Really, that's great. What class do you want to give? What's the topic? Duque smiled mysteriously. Basic practice of multicasting, and heat transfer theory of fire. Duque saw that Elusia's body trembled. These were her mother's excuses for letting her study with Duke. The eldest daughter of the Barov family raised her head in bewilderment. She did not know why Duke had chosen to be a guest lecturer at such a time. Kale, that's knew that it was because of his suggestion that Duke had decided to expand his influence and work hard to rebuild the Stormwind Kingdom's mages. Dalaran had an academy that was open to the public. As long as one paid a low fee, they would teach apprentices with magic aptitude the basics of magic. After a few years of screening, those who passed the test would officially become advanced apprentices or beginner magicians, and they would be allowed to enter a higher academy to further their studies. At this point, the Dalajan's learning and research would become quite liberalized. Basic magicians were allowed to study different subjects according to their talents and preferences. They could also study under the tutelage of any magician who was registered in the school. There was a precondition, the equivalent exchange that mages respected the most. Apart from the public classes that were advertised, all of the classes had to be paid. The academy would evaluate the practicality of the subject taught by the lecturer, the theoretical content, the standard of the lecture, and many other factors, and then set a price. The apprentice had to pay for it. Of course, if one wanted to learn more advanced content, they would have to pay the price of becoming the lecturer's disciple. Lecturers also had all sorts of requirements for apprentices. Some wanted money, some wanted the apprentice to provide spellcasting materials, and of course, most wanted the apprentice to be their experimental assistant. Of course, the children of rich families had it easier, but the children of poor families often had to work. Acolytes also had various ways to earn the necessary money. For example, the simplest way was to sell oneself to the Dalajan Mage Guild, sign a contract, and work for them for years in exchange for money. They either worked as mercenaries or created magic items to sell. There were both opportunities and responsibilities. This was the Dalajan. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that as long as Duque showed enough strength, it wasn't impossible to recruit another group of mages. After all, the Stormwind Mage Guild only existed in name. All the mages added together could only fight 12 people. This was just the number of people in a small team. Apart from Duque and the retired old man Norton, everyone else was an earth mage. Duque smiled and wrote down a few advertising slogans. A duel of magic isn't as simple as you think. Still thinking about how to make a bigger fireball to defeat your opponent? Then you're out of date. The legendary mage who burned 100,000 orcs, Duke Marcus, will teach you multicasting. Once you learn it, you can definitely beat other mages of the same level. The three audience members looked at it and their faces turned pale. Arrogant, egotistical, and absolutely subversive. This was because, in the traditional Dalaran mages' teachings, the lecturers mostly taught how to deal with opponents who were also mages. They mostly taught how to build a magic shield and then bombard each other with a bigger fireball to destroy the opponent's shield and achieve victory. What? A big fireball couldn't defeat the opponent? Then it must be because your fireball wasn't big enough. There was no enemy that a big fireball couldn't defeat. If there was, then 2 fireballs would be enough. Now, Duque actually overturned all the arguments of these academic lecturers. If this wasn't subversive, then what was? If it was anyone else, they would definitely be criticized for being sensationalist, but Duque had a lot of achievements to back him up. Whether it was the battle against the demons in Karazhan and killing Medivh, the burning of the Elven Forest, the rescue of 50,000 elite soldiers with the ice ship, or most recently, the rescue of 4 kings from a large group of Orc Sword Saint assassins with his own strength. All of them were dazzling achievements. Before there was better and more sufficient evidence to prove that Duque couldn't do it, no one could refute Duque. No one would be stupid enough to think that Duque was an academic mage. Duque was classified as a typical practical mage. No, to say that practical mages were weak. Because a practical mage could often fight 10 academic mages. Duque. Duque gave people the feeling that he was the kind of guy who wanted to fight 100. In the shortest amount of time, the news that the Alliance's deputy commander Duke Marcus was going to publicly teach practical magic in the Dalagen spread like wildfire throughout the Dalagen in the shortest amount of time. Chapter 281. Dalaran, which used to be bustling with activity, was now shrouded in an interesting and strange atmosphere. Hey! Did you hear? That Duke Marcus is going to have an open class in the Dalagen. Open class? Which Duke Marcus? Idiot. He's the deputy commander of the newly established Lordaeron Alliance, Sir Marcus. Ah. He's a super wizard who fought against demons and killed a large number of elite beastmen. Is he really that powerful? It's a free open class anyway. It's a waste not to attend. Any wizard who was a sky wizard or above was qualified to attend the open class in the Dalagen's high-level magic academy. Every day, there would be announcements of all kinds of open classes on the academy's bulletin board. Because of the favoritism of a certain elf prince, and because Duque was sufficiently famous, Duque's open class was placed on the front page of the magic bulletin board all over the academy. Not only did it have a dazzling red border, but there were also many hands of magic, which symbolized Duque's signature skill, releasing fireballs to attack the image of a scarecrow. Naturally, this attracted a lot of attention. The Dalagen would decide the grade of the open class in a very simple way, and that was through student voting. Any apprentice or wizard could press their magic seal on the bulletin board to show their interest in the class. The day before the class started, they had to go to the Dalagen's curriculum system to confirm the class. The academy would confirm the location of the class the night before according to the number of people participating in the open class. The result of Duque's open class was, of course, popular. It was very simple. Duque was famous enough. He killed the demon king Sargeras, the successor of Karazhan, the Duke of Stormwind, the deputy commander of the Alliance, the youngest peak sky wizard of the current generation, the victim of 200,000 beastmen, and the wizard who could best use magic to coax peerless beauties. Any one of these could attract the attention of apprentices and wizards, not to mention all the glory and fame. The result of the unprecedented popularity of registration was that the number of applicants far exceeded the capacity of any Dalagen lecture hall. The Kirin Tor Council, which was actually Kale, Ats, had no choice but to announce that official mages would be given priority to attend the class, and the remaining places would be given to apprentices. They would be ranked according to their results, and the best batch of apprentices would be given the right to attend the class. 3 days later, more than 12,000 people attended Duque's lecture in the Dalagen's largest central lecture hall. The auditorium, which originally had a capacity of 10,000 people, had an additional 2,000 standing tickets. The auditorium was packed with people. As the central auditorium of the Dalagen people, its specifications were definitely off the charts. Even Duque was flabbergasted by the things that seemed scientific but were actually unscientific. For example, a sound transmission spell that could surround the entire auditorium would allow the voice on the podium to be clearly transmitted to every corner of the auditorium. Another example would be a huge magical image. In the auditorium of 10,000 people, Duque was just a small person to the friends sitting at the top of the mountain. But behind the podium, there was a huge screen that was as tall as 20 meters, which could magnify Duque's figure to an imposing extent. Even the audience in the last row could clearly see the hair on Duque's face. As for the central auditorium, it was usually only used in 2 situations. The first was the annual opening and ending ceremony of the Dalagen. Large numbers of apprentices, their attendants, friends, and followers would fill the auditorium. The other was when an important figure would give a lecture or a speech to the entire Dalagen. In the past 10 years, only Antonidas had enjoyed such treatment. Now, there was a situation that could be considered as the second one, Duke. In terms of battle achievements, Duque was definitely qualified. However, Duque only had the magical undulations of a sky mage, which made many morning star mages very unhappy. When Duque arrived at the scene with Wuxia, someone immediately made a move. As soon as Duque went on stage, the wooden floor under his feet seemed to be under unimaginable pressure and was creaking. It wasn't just the wooden floor. The stone wall, the curtain, the door, and the huge glass window not far from Duque were all trembling as if they would fall apart at any moment. Wuxia's face instantly turned pale. Prince Kale, who had arrived early in the first row in support of Duque, furrowed his long golden eyebrows. Spiritual attack. It was a common method for mages to test the strength of their opponents. For a moment, Kale, wanted to stop it, but he immediately gave up. Respect was not something that could be obtained by talking big. Duque enjoyed almost the same lofty treatment as Antonidas, so he naturally had to bear the corresponding pressure. Even though Duque was also a mage, and the Dalajan welcomed any mage to study in this sacred land of magic, Duque was, after all, not one of the Dalajan. After inheriting Karazhan and the inheritance of the guardian Mediv, who had once stood against the Dalajan, it was inevitable that Duque would be viewed with hostility by the Dalajan mages. In a sense, as a member of the Kirin Tor Council, Kale, should also help those guys. In the end, Kale, chose not to help either side. In the eyes of the group of Morning Star mages, a single Morning Star mage was enough to make Duque, a sky mage, depressed and make a big joke of himself. It would be best if Duque left, so that an outsider would not be able to strut around here. No one would have thought that in the field of magic, Duque was actually an out-and-out weirdo. In terms of the quality of mana, Duque was indeed lacking. In other aspects, Duque completely surpassed most Morning Star mages. What was spiritual force? The definition of ordinary spiritual force would not be discussed here. In the field of mages, the strength of spiritual force reflected a mage's maximum mana recovery speed, the strength of magic, and the ability to use magic. Logically speaking, Duque should not be too strong. However, when Duque released his spiritual force, the expressions of all the mages in the first 10 rows changed. In their field of vision, there was nothing but a smiling Duque. However, in the perception of spiritual force, the hundreds of mages seemed to see a gigantic creature suddenly pouncing out from Duque's body. It was not the simple form of condensing spiritual force into an awl or a net, like most mages. The spiritual force creature formed from spiritual force had a pair of enormous wings that spanned a full 15 meters. Every time the wings flapped, the turbulence of spiritual force was like a storm, sweeping across the entire auditorium in the tens of rows above. The high temperature of the spiritual force easily caused the temperature in the air to rise. With just a flap of the wings, it dispersed the spiritual force of the Morning Star mage who had provoked it. Following that fellow's blood-curdling scream, he went limp in his chair and even lost control of his bladder. All the high-ranked mages gasped at the same time. What kind of spiritual force is this? Chapter 282. In that instant, all the high-ranked wizards knew one thing: Duque was very strong. Some of them wanted to stop for a moment, but a low voice said something that seemed to have magical power, causing all the mages who wanted to retreat to straighten their backs. This is the Dalajan. Yes. This was the Dalajan. The holy land of magic. After the high elves had passed on magic to humans, almost all wizards who came here would prostrate themselves in worship. This place represented the greatest freedom in the world of magic, the most vast knowledge, and the ultimate holiness. Duque represented Karazhan. If Duque did not have a strong backing, if he did not have the title of Duke of Stormwind and the deputy commander of the Alliance, and if Karazhan had not disappeared from the Eastern Kingdom, perhaps some evil and greedy wizards would have challenged Duque for the right of ownership of Karazhan. Most importantly, Duque had made a fool of that fellow. That Morning Star wizard did not have much spiritual force, but he was wearing the violet robes of the Dalian Higher Magic Academy. This reason was enough. Moreover, did Duque not cover the heads of the wizards with his spiritual force? This could be considered a provocation. The second challenger appeared immediately. Unlike the fellow in the third row, this time it was a Morning Star wizard in the second row. According to estimates, this was already a level 3 Morning Star wizard. Without any hesitation, this fellow condensed his spiritual force into an incomparably sharp spike, piercing towards Duque's spiritual force beast with an unknown shape and huge wings like the wind. In the world of spiritual force, just as the sharp spike was about to pierce through Duque's spiritual force beast, a claw with only 3 fingers grew out of the beast's body and closed in on it. Kacha. There was no sound in the world of spiritual force. This action itself seemed to have brought about a kacha sound. None of their eardrums received any vibrations from the sound, but everyone heard it as if they were hallucinating. As if an important part of his body had been forcibly broken, the level 3 Morning Star covered his head and curled up like a shrimp. Duque was still moving forward, neither too fast nor too slow. On the huge stage, under the illumination of the soft magic lamp, he walked toward the podium at a constant pace. He did not seem to notice the spiritual force attacks from the 2 Morning Star wizards at all, and continued walking with a faint smile and unparalleled confidence. Duque was clearly saying, "I'll leave enough time for you to attack." What an arrogant advertisement. An attitude that was 100 times more arrogant than an advertisement. They were treating the Dalian advanced magicians like they were nothing. Not every Morning Star wizard was young and full of vigor. Many Morning Star wizards were no longer young, and they had no intention of fighting because of their age and experience. However, things were different now. The third Morning Star made his move. This time, his spiritual force condensed into a ball and turned into a cannonball, shooting towards Duque's spiritual force beast. It was still the same claw. Like flicking a melon seed, the claw flicked lightly, and the cannonball was shot back at a speed faster than when it came. The fellow hurriedly activated his spiritual force shield, but it was useless. The speed was just too fast. Even if it was his own spiritual energy that came over, suddenly receiving a surge of chaotic spiritual energy was not something he could withstand. He clutched his chest in pain and pointed at Duque, unable to say a single word. The fourth Morning Star was sitting at the side of the first row. This Morning Star wizard was obviously one of the best among the Morning Stars. Whether he was a level 7 or 8, Duque did not know. All he knew was that this fellow's spiritual force had turned into a 3-meter-tall giant with a blurry figure. It wielded a giant axe and chopped down at Duque's beast. This fellow was too much. If the attacks from the other 3 were mainly probing attacks, this fellow was definitely going all out. Even though they did not dare to underestimate Duque, a spiritual force attack of this level could destroy the opponent's magic circuits and turn him into a cripple. Duque furrowed his brows, his expression turning cold for the first time. This time, the beast's counterattack was a long tail. A tail that was at least 10 meters long and as thick as a bison's body swept towards them. The mages could even sense the clear scales on the tail. Crack. The handle of the giant axe, the giant's head, and even half of the giant's body were all crushed by this incomparably heavy tail with an even higher concentration of spiritual force. Ugh! This fellow vomited blood on the spot. Bright red blood flowed out from the gaps between the fingers of his left hand that he had covered his mouth. At the same time, the tiles under his feet and the chair he had made were all turned to dust. He fell to the ground pathetically, unable to sit up no matter what. In the first row, no less than 5 Morning Stars looked at each other and nodded in unison, almost indiscernible. It was not an excessive spiritual force attack, and the level of the attack was reduced to that of a probing attack. However, this was a probing attack that was close to going all out. Be it a sword, a spear, an arrow, a stinger, or a hammer, 5 different spiritual force weapons attacked Duque in unison, arriving in front of Duque's spiritual force beast almost at the same time. Anyone could see that Duque's spiritual force beast had been specially made into the form of a dragon. Most of the wizards snorted. It took a lot of effort to make the spiritual energy look like this. Everyone agreed that it would weaken the offensive power of the spiritual energy. Since the brain would put extra effort into forming the form, most mages would choose to use the more simple and practical form of the spiritual energy. This did not include Duque. With the help of the system elf, Duque would not only make a dragon, he could even make a Ultraman and play with the death ray. What Duque valued the most was the system scan, which helped him instantly identify the weak point of the opponent's spiritual force. In every wizard's spiritual force ball, the quality and quantity of spiritual force were not evenly distributed, which gave Duque a chance. Duque was not superior to his opponent in terms of quality and quantity, but Duque only needed to find the weak point of his opponent's spiritual force, or even the weak point, and that would be enough. In the vision of spiritual force, the wizards could sense that Duque's dragon had finally revealed its true form. However, when the 5 large spiritual force weapons attacked, the dragon's claws suddenly lengthened, and 2 kitchen knives appeared in its claws. At this moment, Wuxia, who was trembling behind Duque, heard Duque's soft voice. 56 consecutive meteor blast slash. The spiritual force blades danced at high speed, stirring up a storm that instantly engulfed the space between Duque and the 5 Morning Star wizards. In the blink of an eye, the 5 wizards collapsed into their seats. Chapter 283. Impossible. This was absolutely impossible. How could a sky wizard resist, defeat so many Morning Star wizards in the domain of spiritual force? Looking at the wizards who looked like frostbitten eggplants, no one could say a word. It felt like these Morning Star wizards, who were rather famous in the Dalajan, were complete fools, each of them extending their faces for Duque to slap. It wasn't just an ordinary slap, but one that grabbed their collars and slapped them back and forth until their faces were swollen. A total of 9 wizards, 1 Sky Star and 8 Morning Stars, had charged forward in the most shameful form of attrition warfare. In the end, they had been defeated by 1 person against 9, and all of them had been defeated without even catching their breath. Did they not see Duque slowly walk across the podium in an incomparably confident manner? In the huge hall, apart from Duque's footsteps, there was almost no other sound. Of the 12,000 people in the hall, not a single one was an ordinary person. They were either official wizards or acolytes. As long as they were acolytes, they would be able to sense the spiritual force undulations from the battle between Duque and them. Everyone was very clear about the probing effect of releasing their spiritual power. Evidently, even the acolytes who had not seen the whole picture knew. Duque had obtained complete victory. 1 against 9. If Duque was not a foreign wizard, and if Duque was a lecturer from the Dalajan, then what would be welcoming Duque would definitely be thunderous applause. The acolytes and novice wizards were all agitated. In this huge fan-shaped hall, everyone's gaze was on the first row. After all, only the high-ranked wizards there could defeat, challenge Duque successfully. In the middle of the first row, there were still a few publicly acknowledged Morning Star wizards. However, they were unmoved, as if they were the best students, listening attentively. In reality, the real focus was on the only Radiant Moon wizard present. Kale, that's the High Elf Prince of Kuel Salis. If Kale, that's made a move, even 10 Duques would be defeated. But would Kale, that's make a move? What a joke. Kaizi was here to support Duque. Seeing that Kale, that's had maintained a gentle and refined smile ever since Duque had appeared, the Morning Star wizards who still had the slightest intention of challenging Kale, that's gave up on finding trouble with this incomparably evil sky wizard. 1 step, 2 steps, 5 steps, 10 steps, step by step, Duque walked up to the podium. His figure was magnified by the huge projection screen behind him. At this moment, the first round of applause sounded in the venue. Applauding before the lecturer begins is a form of courtesy, a form of welcome. However, with Kale, that Sunstrider, leading the applause, it was a grand welcome and support that could not be any more grand. Kale, that wasn't clapping from his chair. He was standing up and clapping for Duque. Immediately, the second round of applause rang out. This was from the little princess of Kuel Tiras, Jaina Proudmoore. This mage apprentice of noble birth had long been the dream lover of countless mage apprentices. However, she seemed to be a little close to Prince Arthas of Lordaeron, and the apprentices could only suppress their admiration. The third round of applause rang out almost at the same time as the second. It was from the person most young wizards pursued, Miss Wuxia Barov of the ancient noble bloodline of the Arathor Empire. Even though she was standing not far behind Duque as an assistant, her real attitude still caused a silent uproar. It was only then that the people in the auditorium truly realized that the person standing on the podium was not only a true mage, but also a noble existence who was deeply trusted and respected by the upper echelons of various countries. There was no more hesitation. Immediately, thunderous applause rang out in the auditorium. It was so loud that it was enough to make people outside think that some kind of terrifying experiment had exploded. Duque's hands pressed down, and after a while, the applause gradually stopped. Clearing his throat, Duque's slightly magnetic voice spread to every corner of the auditorium. I'm very happy that so many people have come to listen to Duke Marcus's lecture today. In the following time, I will explain the importance of multicasting and the basic training methods. I hope that my lecture will be of help to everyone on the path of magic. Magic is a mysterious field. I think that the first thing that every lucky person who is qualified to step into this field should do is not to be bound by common sense. What? This can't be done, oh, that's impossible. These are the most unacceptable thoughts. So we have to free our imagination. Here, I will first demonstrate the benefits of multicasting. After saying that, Duque turned his head to Wuxia, Miss Barov. Later, when you have a magical shield, please attack each other with the lowest level of level 1 fireball. And please do not use any metamagic abilities, and try to maintain the power of the fireball between 14 to 22 MP. Wuxia nodded. Magic points were the standard to measure the damage caused by a spell. 14 MP meant that if it hit, it would cause 14 points of basic damage to a creature with no magic resistance. In the next moment, when Wuxia indicated that she was ready, the two of them bombarded each other under the supervision of the magic scale. 5 seconds of casting time, the same amount of mana consumption, 16 points and 22 points of damage. This is what you all know as using a bigger fireball to deal with the opponent, right? As soon as Duque's voice fell, the audience burst into laughter that they were trying to hold back. However, when using a level 10 fireball, the casting time becomes 5 seconds. Normally, the person with the bigger fireball wins, right? That's right. An apprentice shouted. Alright, now I will split the mana required for a level 10 fireball, and then continuously bombard Miss Barov. Everyone, see the results. Wuxia was still chanting, attacking Duque with a level 10 fireball every 5 seconds. Duque, on the other hand, used 2 magician's hands, a total of 3 level 5 fireballs, with a speed of 5 seconds between each fireball, bombarding Wuxia in succession. Everyone was immediately surprised to see that Wuxia, whose magical shield was continuously bombarded, was quickly showing signs of defeat under the situation of the total amount of mana consumption. Although the continuous attacks were not considered powerful, it was obvious that the magic attacks impacted her shield, which affected her concentration, causing the chanting time to be extended. At the beginning, Alicia could barely maintain the completion time of 2 or 3 fireballs within 4 seconds, but towards the end, the fireball, which was as common as eating and drinking to most official mages, actually took a full 6 seconds to shoot out one fireball. Everyone could see that both damage and accuracy were greatly reduced. Chapter 284. Just as Duque's 12th fireball hit Alicia's magic shield in a 3-on-1 situation, the shield, which should have lasted longer, suddenly exploded. Looking at the fireball that was heading straight for her, Alicia let out a cry of surprise. Everyone thought that Duque's fireball was about to destroy the flower, and there were even some apprentices who could not bear to see the beautiful Miss Berev disfigured. At this moment, Duque snapped his fingers, and all the fireballs that flew out actually made an elegant circle in the air, circling 180 degrees, and returned to Duque's side, floating in the air. Duque raised his hand, and all the fireballs disappeared. Duque's voice sounded again, "I did not use other meta-magic abilities to bully Miss Berev just now. This technique is actually similar to when people are facing the siege of 3 mages or magic apprentices who are of a lower level than themselves, and are often flustered by the enemy's continuous attacks. It's just that after mastering multicasting, you become the one fighting with the many." In order to leave a deeper impression, please take a look at the following footage. What Duque was showing on the magic screen was the footage of him using 108 hands of magic to rain down arcane missiles on the orc army at the Red Ridge Mountain, using the simplest arcane missiles to form an exaggerated barrage. The lowest level of magic caused the most gorgeous massacre. This kind of epic-making real war documentary gave the strongest psychological impact. Just 2 minutes of footage, more than 11,000 apprentices were mesmerized. Not every apprentice with magic aptitude had the opportunity to become an official mage. Below, in addition to those young faces, there were middle-aged magic craftsmen, white-haired human elders in their 70s or 80s, and high elves who did not have much aptitude but resolutely left their countries to seek the truth of magic. These people all had the same dream, the dream of making themselves stronger in magic. For a moment, too many people's breathing quickened. A hand was raised, and Duque called his name, "Please speak." "Excuse me, does learning multicasting require specific talent?" This was the focus of everyone's attention. I can only say that those with talent will make faster progress in learning the supreme magical skills of multicasting. However, I believe that everyone can learn this technique after rigorous self-training. At the very least, it can greatly improve their spellcasting ability. Duque used a magic pen to write the words multitasking on the special magic board on the podium. The words were clearly reflected on the big screen. Multicasting is the most basic of the basics. If you have enough biological knowledge, you will know that whether it is humans or elves, the brain is actually divided into left and right parts. The left and right sides of the brain could actually coordinate, allowing the human body to make coordinated movements. In fact, the left and right sides of the brain can direct our left and right hands to make different movements and give different responses. With that, Duque showed it to everyone with the help of the system elf. At the same time, he drew a circle with his left hand and a square with his right. Looking at an extremely standard circle and a square at the same time, everyone thought it was easy at first, but later they were shocked to find that it was not as easy as they thought. Either the left and right hands drew both circles at the same time, or they drew both squares at the same time. The best was to draw 2 awkward patterns that were neither round nor square at the same time. There was never a lack of geniuses in this world, and soon someone succeeded. For example, Jaina, she easily drew a circle and a square at the same time in the air with the arcane energy flowing out of her fingers. Apart from her, more than 10 people succeeded one after another. Not only were there official mages, but there were also magic apprentices. At this moment, Duque stopped. "I'm glad that many students succeeded. Because time is limited, please practice in this direction on your own. I can give you a simple standard. the second stage is this. Shamelessly, Duque gave his right hand to himself and his left to the system elf. Then, both hands started at the same time. The left hand drew a more complicated polygonal pattern, while the right hand drew an arc of different radius. The third stage. At this time, his left hand drew a Dalijan-style architectural pattern, while his right hand sketched directly at Wuxia. Wuxia's face turned red. In the end, when you can do what I did, it will be perfect. Duque used both his left and right hands to silently write the incantation. It was the incantation for the simplest, Fireball, and Frost Arrow. These two completely different sentences made the audience gasp in amazement. Not only the apprentices, but even the official mages had to admire Duque's nature-defying abilities. Prince Kale, who also mastered multicasting, also revealed a thoughtful expression. To be honest, Kale, could also blast out a few fire spells at the same time, but it would undoubtedly weaken the power of his magic, and it would be difficult to coordinate. Duque's training method undoubtedly gave Kale, a lot of inspiration. It was no exaggeration to say that Kale, ability to practice this was due to his talent. Now, what Duque proposed was a more systematic training method with clear goals. Another apprentice raised his hand. Lecturer Marcus, may I ask how to satisfy the need to recite the incantation? I only have one voice. The more naive question was also the key to multicasting. Those arrogant big shots split into several voices in their own spiritual sea and fulfilled this request. Duque had a more convenient method. Of course, the essence of spellcasting is to use the incantation to mobilize the magic power in the body and connect it to the elemental world or the outside world. Brilliant mages can do all this in their own spiritual world. But I have a simpler method, and that is to use echoes. Duque snapped his fingers, and several walls made of arcane energy appeared in the void beside him. Duque said something casually, and the echoes echoed throughout the venue. Echoes. He actually thought of creating echoes to complete the necessary steps of multicasting. Obviously, this was another epoch-making genius idea. For a moment, the audience was in awe, and once again there was a thunderous applause. This time, the applause lasted for nearly a minute. Duque's hands pressed down, and it took a long time for the applause to gradually stop. Someone asked again. So, how to create echoes when casting? Duque smiled evilly. Sorry, student, this is already a fee. I haven't thought about how to charge you, but it will be announced in 2 or 3 days. Suddenly, there was another burst of laughter. Next, Duque said a lot more. For example, he used the theory of thermodynamics to explain the flow of fire elements. Unknowingly, 2 hours passed. Chapter 285. Duque, with the knowledge of a transmigrator and an engineering and equipment major, systematically explained to more than 10,000 people what fire was, the nature of fire, and the characteristics of fire. For the magic apprentices in the world of Azeroth, this was an almost new theoretical system, but it did not conflict with the magic knowledge they had learned before. They were simply fascinated by it. Some official mages wanted to find Duque's faults and refute Duque, but they could not find a single flaw in his words. For example, heat will only flow from a high temperature to a low temperature. For example, if the temperature of a fire is high, it can heat up cold water. These seemingly easy-to-understand things, after being systematically explained by professional thermodynamics theory, almost all magic apprentices realized that their fireball would definitely improve. Fireball was not to be underestimated. As the first damaging spell that most magic apprentices learned, the popularity of Fireball could be said to be 100%. It was no exaggeration to say that the thermodynamics theory that Duque had brought over had an obvious effect on the improvement of the magic level of the entire Dalijan. When the last grain of sand in the magic hourglass that was specially used to measure time fell and a pleasant hum sounded on the podium, Duque just happened to say, "Today's class ends here. My lecture is over." His timing was so precise that he did not seem like a young man at all, but the most experienced teacher. For a moment, the audience was in an uproar. "Lecturer Marcus. Don't stop so quickly. Speak more. Speak more. We still want to listen." "Lecturer, that's great." After a brief uproar, everyone seemed to realize that Duque would definitely not delay the class. Immediately, there was an earth-shattering applause in the huge auditorium. Clap, 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 clap. The applause was like an endless tsunami, lasting for a long time. Apart from the unlucky few who left early in the morning due to injuries, every magic apprentice, every official mage who came to listen to the lecture, and of course, Kale, that's, all stood up and gave Duque the most sincere applause. After the applause stopped, Kale, that's had already come to the podium with a bright smile on his face. "Wonderful, Duque, your lecture has completely exceeded the limits of my imagination. I thought you were best at actual combat, but I didn't expect your theoretical knowledge to be just as rich. I can't even tell if you're a practical or an academic." Although Kale, that's really wanted to ask if these theories came from Mediva's Karazhan library, asking now would undoubtedly help Duque start a fight. Kale, that's was simply happy for Duque. On the other side, Jaina had already become a fan. She chased after Duque and asked him all sorts of questions in admiration. "Brother Marcus, do you accept disciples? Why don't I become your disciple?" Right now, Jaina was still a rather innocent girl. Her watery blue eyes made it easy for people to feel sorry for her, so she agreed immediately. "Don't you worship Antonidas?" Duque blurted out. "Hey, how did you know?" Only then did Duque realize that he had spilled the beans, but it was easy to make up for it. Who in the Dalajan doesn't worship Master Antonidas? That's true. But Master is very busy. Recently, he said he was injured, but everyone knows that he's actually in the laboratory every day. A flock of non-existent crows flew over Duque's head. "Antonidas, can you be more professional at pretending to be sick? Even a 12-year-old girl knows that you're pretending." Of course, Duque had no interest in provoking Jaina. Leaving aside her vacillating personality between war and peace, Duque had no confidence in teaching Jaina. He knew his own business. Duque was not a pure academic. Duque himself was half-baked in the real magic theories of this world. Even if Duque was unhappy with Jaina, who had cursed his father to death in the history, Jaina was still one of the more capable heroes in the history of the Alliance. She would be a core existence in too many major events in the future. Messing with Jaina's growth would make the future even more uncontrollable. Duque grandly refused. "My apologies, Princess Proudmoore. I'm actually very busy. This time, I'm here mainly to visit Master Antonidas and help Stormwind recruit some mages to rebuild the Stormwind Royal Mages." At this time, there were many people in front of the stage. When everyone heard this, they immediately understood. Duque did not hide his purpose. The world of mages was about equivalent exchange. Cheating was a bad idea. Duque smiled and turned to Wuxia. "My assistant, I'll leave the answer to my questions about accepting disciples to you. Become my disciple or assistant, and you will receive my guidance and the right to read the bottom 3 levels of the Karazhan Grand Library for free. The price is to join the Stormwind Royal Mages as my disciple, and fight for the Alliance and Stormwind for 3 years. Just like joining the Dalajan Mages could get all kinds of benefits, Duque's recruitment was also very open. It was both a risk and an opportunity. When she heard that she had the obligation to fight, Jaina knew that she had no chance. Her father would not allow the underage Jaina to get involved in the war. In fact, Dylan had already informed her that if the Dalajan was in danger, there would be a specialized group of mages that would teleport her back to Kul Tiras in the shortest time possible. Sigh. Jaina sighed. Looks like I can only wait until this war is over before I have the chance to visit Marcus. Duque smiled and did not say anything. After the lecture, Duque was immediately captured by Antonidas. When he came to Antonidas' laboratory again, the white-haired old man did not treat Duque so well. "Oh, Duque, this is not very kind of you. You will weaken the Dalajan's war potential." Duque shrugged his shoulders. Of course, he knew that even though the Dalajan had always pursued a liberal policy, where the nobles of other countries could hire any apprentice or official mages who had not signed a slave contract, that was during times of peace. Now was the time between the war between the Alliance and the Horde. Of course, the Dalajan had its own considerations. Duque's blatant recruitment would not cause any problems on the surface, but he was afraid that the Kirin Tor parliament would make things difficult for the Alliance. Duque bowed deeply. "For the future and war potential of the Dalajan, I am willing to make 1,000 copies of Karazhan's magic books and give them to the Great Dalajan Library." Antonida's long white eyebrows twitched. 5,000 copies, 100 mages, 300 apprentices. 2,000 copies, 500 mages, 1,000 apprentices. Why don't you just rob them? The Kirin Tor Parliament's president was furious. Wrong, it's easy to rob them. Duque obviously knew the importance of those magic books. He was not worried that Antonidas would not take the bait. Knowledge was power. No. That's too many. At most, 200 mages and 500 apprentices. Thus, the two of them, who could shake the Alliance with just a stomp of their feet, began to bicker like ants in the market in this laboratory where there were no outsiders. The final price was 3,000 copies of magic books in exchange for 200 official mages and 500 apprentices. Chapter 286. In the Hillsbrad Hills, there was a stone castle standing on a hill. This was the temporary palace of the Stormwind royal family. Almost every day, new decorations were brought into the castle, be it rockery, or beautiful marble statues, or replacing the previously terrible floor tiles. King Lang repeatedly said that the kingdom did not have the financial surplus to pay the stonemasons' wages. The stonemasons expressed their gratitude towards Duque for saving their lives. Since they had nothing to do in the winter after building the blockhouses, they could find some stones to practice with. However, the stonemasons also expressed that when rebuilding Stormwind City in the future, they still needed to pay the required wages, but only at the cost price. Lang expressed his agreement. Looking at the so-called refugee camp that was becoming more and more prosperous, Lang was quite speechless. It was already quite inappropriate to call this a refugee camp. It was completely the prototype of a new city. The 3-meter-high stone wall could accommodate 3 people walking side by side, protecting nearly 500,000 residents. The newly cultivated fields in the distance were all protected by huge wooden fences. Every 300 meters or so, there was a wooden 10-meter-high arrow tower that could monitor all directions of the fields without any blind spots. There was nothing lacking in the city. The market, medical, sanitation, fire protection, water supply, city guards, and all the other buildings were arranged in an orderly manner. In a city that lacked money, there was no such thing as the state taking care of everything. All food and daily necessities had to be exchanged through labor. About 30% of the food harvested in the autumn was handed over to the Ministry of Civil Affairs of Storm Kingdom, except for the portion that was necessary for each family. In return, the Ministry of Civil Affairs would issue a batch of vouchers with a stamp and an equivalent amount of money. These vouchers could be used to exchange for cloth and other daily necessities at the market. The rest of the work was similar. Whether it was logging or mining, all supplies were collected in proportion, and the workers received vouchers as wages for the rest. Despite the obvious lack of money, the entire refugee camp was like a self-sufficient independent kingdom, operating extremely well. It was completely unimaginable that half a year ago, this was a group of refugees who had almost given up on life and the future. One day in December, looking at the black smoke rising from the chimneys in the city, Lang felt an inexplicable warmth in his heart. On this day, Anduin Lothar returned. Lang and Anduin gave each other a warm hug. Anduin, what's the situation? Sigh, in winter, I, the commander of the Alliance, am a beggar, holding a broken jar and going around begging. I only got a bunch of promises that I don't know if they'll be fulfilled. There's nothing substantial at all. It was precisely because there was no one else that Anduin could complain so presumptuously. A promise is better than no promise at all. Lang asked a servant to bring him a cup of hot wine. When Anduin first came in, he did not see it clearly. Seeing that the room was already very presentable, Anduin clenched his fists. Damn it, am I seeing things? Why do I feel like I've returned to Storm Fortress? It does look like it, doesn't it? Lang shrugged. I didn't force the stonemasons to make these things. Anyway, it's Duque's favor. Anduin combed his hair with his fingers. Sigh, compared to him, I feel that my diplomatic skills are terrible. Yes, what good news does that kid have? Is a new team of mages from the Storm King family considered good news? 200 official mages and 500 mage apprentices. Although they've only signed a 3-year contract. Lothar's eyeballs were about to pop out of their sockets. Is old man Antonidas willing to let them go? Duque said that he used a copy of Karazhan's magic book to exchange for them. I don't know anything about magic. Anyway, what he said was true. Since Stormwind had put in so much effort to help collect it, it's definitely worth it to exchange a dungeon for these people. Of course, I agree. Agree. Oh my god, that kid is too impressive. Lothar patted Lang's shoulder hard. Ryan had a faint bitter smile on his face. Why? You're still not happy? If this goes on, there's hope for us to recover Stormwind. Lothar said as he gulped down a few mouthfuls of wine. Anduin, actually, I've been thinking. If we can recover Stormwind, why don't we give Duque the title of king? This topic was a little too heavy, and Lothar could not react for a while. Think about it. We all know that Duque is actually not from Stormwind. But how much has he done for us? Without him, perhaps there would only be 10,000 to 20,000 refugees left in Stormwind. I would have died in Stormwind City long ago, either at the hands of Garona or with Stormwind City. I know that you'll take good care of William for me. Maybe you'll also become the commander of the Alliance. But how much authority do you have? You don't even have an army under your direct command. Even if you lead the Alliance to defeat the Horde in the future, how many people will help you and William restore the country? But, look outside, Anduin. Outside the window were 500,000 well-fed citizens of the Storm Kingdom, who could safely survive the winter, and 100,000 elite soldiers who were full of morale and were willing to die for the kingdom. Before the arrival of winter, perhaps more citizens who had gone to other countries will rush back. This is all possible with Duque's help. Duque's ability is not inferior to any founding ruler in human history. At this point, Lang fell silent. That was the truth. The stability of the South Shore refugee camp had attracted the citizens who had previously left. The soldiers that had been lost in the Battle of South Shore had also been quickly replenished. If it weren't for the difficulty of raising soldiers, it would not be impossible to gather all the young and strong people to form an army of 200,000. Of course, all the young and strong people in the refugee camp had begun to receive military training. There were still plenty of reserve soldiers. Thoradin the Great is great, but as the capital of the Arathar Empire, the torrential fort declined after a short period of time. The other city-states have become independent kingdoms, such as Rotterdam and the Dalagen. There are still many enemies for humans. If this is an unstoppable trend, why not just let them go? Have you asked Duque? Anduin suddenly asked. No. But you can imagine that Duque also has subordinates, and Duque also has people who support him. When that time comes, it won't be a matter of whether Duque wants to or not. Lang sighed again. I, who once destroyed a country, have thought through everything now. Anyway, I will go with the flow. After the restoration of the country, Duque can be conferred the title of king if he wants. If he doesn't want to be conferred the title of king, I will give him the treatment of a prince, and I will set up a national policy that will be passed on to William and his future descendants. It will be enough if Stormwind can preserve most of the elven forest. All right, I also agree to it. It depends. Lothar finally nodded. Chapter 287. The harsh winter left most people with nothing to do. Of course, Duque would not waste this time. In the Hillsbrad Hills, in a huge wooden hall, there were many veterans who had experienced the war with the orcs. They might not be able to fight on the battlefield due to various injuries, but they used their own words and deeds to teach the new soldiers how to face the orcs. Not only that, the Nagas under Duque were once again put to use, continuing to train the soldiers with similar battles. In Karazhan, Duque finally had the time to come back, and then Khadgar ran away in tears. Master! I miss you so much. I'm bored to death. Duque used all his strength to resist, using his hand to stop Khadgar's crying soul. Damn it, oh, no, you're a ghost. You're not the only one here. Where's Michael? The Einherjars are all here. I have nothing to talk to those muscular men. I really don't understand why they still run every day when they're already Einherjars. Duque was speechless. It's probably because they have nothing to do if they don't fight demons, right? Duke suddenly understood why the upper nobles of the High Elves were so decadent. With unlimited life force, a boring life was the easiest to corrode the soul. Okay, get ready. I have a large group of apprentices coming, living people. Duque told Khadgar about how he had kidnapped a group of mages in the Dalagen. Yes, master, I will ask Michael and the others to clean up the room. Actually, I don't plan to let them stay in Karazhan for too long. After all, Karazhan is in a crack in space and time. I don't know if living here for a long time will have any negative effects on their bodies. I plan to let them come to the library 3 times a week to borrow and return magic books. You just need to be a good librarian. Open up the library for books below the Earth Mage level to them. Khadgar's soul put its hands on its hips. Okay. At least I won't be so lonely. Those who came to follow Duque were naturally not high-level mages. The official mages were all Earth mages from relatively poor backgrounds. They could neither become a famous teacher like Krasis, nor could they afford the exorbitant tuition fees. One had to know that everything in the Dalagen was equivalent exchange. Even if one were to sell oneself to the Dalagen mages, the money obtained would only be enough to read a limited number of magic books. How could it compare to the unlimited reading in Karazhan? Besides, he could attend Duque's lectures 3 times a week in Hillsbrad's classroom. In fact, Duque wasn't fooling them. Duque's simplified fire elemental magic formulas that the system elves had deduced could allow their strength to improve greatly. The simplest example was that after training, every official mage would be pleasantly surprised to find that they had begun to master the 2 meta-magic abilities, Enhanced Fireball, and Flame Throw. The former could shorten the chanting time of their fireball spell, while the latter could increase the range of their fireball spell. For ordinary mages with mediocre aptitudes, this alone was enough for them to work for 3 years. After the hearts of the mages were settled, Duque finally began to build his ice circuit. Crown of Ice, the core magic circuit of Archmage Antonidas. In this era, apart from Medivh, who had just died, who was a true demigod mage who specialized in all three elements, the other two mages had typical preferences. The Sun King, an Astrian Sunstrider, was fire. Antonidas was ice. However, whether or not the magic circuits of these two supreme magicians could be fused was a very serious problem. Because the circuits of both were quite domineering. The arcane fire circuit was not an ordinary circuit. In fact, after using it for a long time, Duque suddenly realized that the arcane fire circuit should be called the arcane flame circuit. What was arcane? Arcane was the phoenix that had been hidden by Kale. That's the real name of the arcane fire circuit passed down in the Sunstrider family should be Phoenix Flames. Why did the Sun King know that Aurelia had lost the cultivation method of the Phoenix Flames magic circuit, but only punish Aurelia for 3 months? Why did Antonidas give away the model of the top-tier, Crown of Ice, magic circuit just like that? Was Janus Barav really that important? Duque had carefully considered this question before. Recently, the system genie had given Duque an answer. There were no problems with these two sets of magic circuit models, nor were there any flaws. As a foundation, these were the best ice and fire circuits. The crux of the matter was that when advancing to a higher level, a specific item was needed. A core item that could allow fire or ice elements to be further sublimated. Simply put, it was a flame origin comparable to Kale, that's Phoenix Arcane, or an ice origin of the same level. Otherwise, advancing to Morning Star was the limit of this circuit. Perhaps Duque could beat some Radiant Moon mages with the help of the system, but he would never be able to attack a true Breaking Dawn. Duque suddenly smiled bitterly. The old guys are really smart. Antonidas did not give Duque an arcane magic circuit, but it did not matter. The original, Phoenix Flames, also had an arcane circuit model. As a fire magic with explosive damage output, it required more arcane magic support, so the arcane model of Phoenix Flames was still very strong. The system estimated that unless he wanted to advance to a Radiant Moon Mage, this arcane model was definitely enough for Morning Star. If a Phoenix's fire elemental source was installed in the Phoenix Flames circuit, then the fire circuit would squeeze Duque's arcane circuit like a juicer. When that time came, a new source of arcane magic would also be necessary. Alright, let's take it one step at a time. In the highest level of Karazhan, Duque set up a series of protective spell formations. These were things he had learned from the books in Karazhan. It was not enough to defend against true experts, but Morning Stars were not a problem. With Karazhan's own defenses, it was still very safe. System notification detected that the host has a large amount of professional knowledge related to refrigeration. Relevant knowledge is being imported. Thermodynamic fundamentals, hydrodynamic pumps and fans, refrigeration principles and equipment, air conditioning principles and equipment, refrigeration process design, refrigeration and air conditioning automation, refrigeration and air conditioning engineering. Knowledge import complete. Optimizing the magic circuit model of Crown of Ice. Optimization complete. Beginning modification of the host's original magic model. The next moment, Duque felt as if he had fallen from a warm world into an icy hell. Chapter 288. The three-element pharaoh was a freak. However, in Duque's memories, only Medivh and Khadgar were three-element pharaoh. The rest were mostly fire or ice. Even though the system elf had fully calculated the possible consequences of practicing the Crown of Ice, and considered the possibility of fire and water being incompatible, Duque had still severely underestimated this. Logically speaking, the Phoenix Flames, which had the home advantage, should have the absolute upper hand. Thus, before reorganizing his arcane spell circuit and adding the Crown of Frost, Duke deliberately weakened the arcane spell circuit supply of arcane energy to the flame spell circuit. What Duke did not expect was that the optimized Crown of Ice would actually turn the tables on him and take the initiative to snatch all the energy ports of the arcane circuit. What the F***ck? Duke cursed, a system elf? Why is the Crown of Ice suppressing the Phoenix Flames? Aren't the two circuit models of the same level? Oh, dear host, let me calculate for a moment. Beep, calculation completed. It seems to be because the Phoenix Flames is the basic version for beginners, while the Crown of Ice is the advanced version for advancing wizards. The latter is more complete. In order for the host to advance to a Morning Star Wizard, the Crown of Ice has begun to absorb all the energy in the surroundings for advancement. Duke suddenly realized that not only had the icy circuit cut off the energy source of the Phoenix Flames, this overbearing magic model had actually begun to erode the fire circuit, attempting to transform it into ice. Wait. If this goes on, what will happen to my magic circuit? Beep, the latest deduction. If the host is unable to control the spread of the icy circuit, after advancing to the Morning Star realm, the icy circuit will dominate all circuits except the most basic arcane circuit, and will prevent other types of circuits from being produced in the host's body. At this moment, Duke's heart skipped a beat, as if it had been petrified by magic. Then, a gust of wind blew, turned to ash, turned to ash. Damn it! Without another word, Duke flipped the table in his mind. What happened to the three-element pharaoh? How could ice magic alone be enough? There was no good ending for those who were partial to certain subjects. Thinking back to history, weren't all the ice mages who specialized in the ice element beaten up in the end? Antonidas was pushed by Arthes. Kel Thuzad, who had become a frost lich, was pushed down by 40 players. Jaina's defense of Mount Hyjal could not withstand Archimonde's frenzied attacks. No. I don't want a simple frost circuit. Then. I can only ask the host to enter his spiritual world and obtain complete control of the Crown of Ice. However, this is very dangerous. If the host fails, your soul may forever be trapped in the depths of your own spiritual sea. You will become an existence equivalent to a vegetable. Whatever. Fortune is found in danger. This young master will risk it all. The next second, Duke's entire consciousness was sucked into a magical illusory world. Duke looked up at this lonely peak and was speechless for a long time. He thought that Mount Hyjal in the world of Azeroth was majestic, and Mount Everest, where people fell to their deaths every year before he transmigrated, was steep. However, in front of this lonely peak that stood tall in Duke's spiritual world, they all had to prostrate themselves. Duke did not know if he should call this lonely peak a mountain. Because this was completely beyond the scope of natural scenery. This snow-white lonely peak in his spiritual world was completely the pillar of the world, supporting the entire world. Duke was on a platform at the foot of the mountain. Behind him was a bottomless abyss with rolling clouds and mist. In front of him was this peerless peak that struck one's heart and shocked Duke. The only thing that allowed Duke to see his target was the cold white light that kept flashing above the clouds. An inexplicable voice was attracting Duke, telling Duque that it was the most precious pearl on the Crown of Ice. He had lost contact with the system elf. Obviously, the strongest king system could do nothing about this internal magic world that went deep into the depths of Duque's spiritual world. Duque took a deep breath, and all that seeped into his lungs was cold water vapor. Duque suddenly realized that he had to reach the top of this straight lonely peak. Otherwise, everything would be empty talk. But how was he going to climb up this mountain without any tools? Suddenly, he found that on the cliff of the lonely peak, there was a small opening at the top of every 20 centimeters that sprayed out water mist. Water mist. This is the spiritual world that the Crown of Ice created for me? This, Duque suddenly understood. When he reached the edge of the platform, Duke said in a low voice, "Ice seal." The ice circuit that existed in an unknown part of his body suddenly rotated at a high speed, absorbing the surrounding cold aura and turning it into ice elements, gathering under Duke's feet. In less than 1/100th of a second, the water vapor that sprayed out, mixed with the ice elements, actually turned into an extremely stable staircase that stuck to the cliff of the lonely peak and extended out for about a meter. It just so happened that this staircase was actually stepped on by Duke. Duke looked up at the sky. If he followed the place where the water vapor sprayed out to make ice stairs, he really couldn't count how many steps he would have to make from here to the top of the mountain. However, Duke could clearly feel that in his body, or rather, in the body that he had imagined in the spiritual world, the reconstructed ice circuit was cheering and jumping. It was constantly encouraging Duke to use it to make more stairs, or to use it anywhere that the ice circuit could be used. How long had passed? He didn't know. Duke's consciousness was numb and blurry. There was no hunger in his stomach. Instead, in the process of continuously using the ice circuit, Duke only felt that the aura of ice had penetrated his limbs and bones, becoming his body and his life. He lowered his head and looked down. As Duke continued to build and climb the mountain, he had already made an extremely long spiral staircase. Every step was crystal clear, as if it was carved from the purest white marble. On both sides of the long staircase, there were 2 exquisite ice handrails. Between each long staircase, there was an icicle that was as thick as a thigh connecting the north, south, east, and west directions. It seemed to be a support, but it also seemed to be a marker for Duke to calculate the number of laps for himself. In Duke's field of vision, the lonely peak became thinner and thinner as it went down. Finally, it turned into a straight black line that pierced deep into this world filled with water vapor. What was the end of this place? Duke suddenly realized that if this continued, he would be completely lost in this world. His consciousness, which had become muddled because of the ice, suddenly began to operate again. No. I'm here to conquer the crown of ice. No matter how beautiful the crown is, it's just a decoration on my head. The crown is only noble because of the identity of the king. It's not that I have to beg for the recognition of the crown. I, Duke, am you, the master of the crown of ice. I order you to either destroy me, or come out and fight me. Chapter 289. It seemed to be responding to Duke's shouts, but it also seemed to be acknowledging that Duke had truly laid the foundation of the ice circuit while continuously creating the stairs of ice. This cold world finally began to change. The white clouds that were rolling and surging under his feet seemed to have suddenly become violent. The movement that was like a gentle breeze and drizzle earlier became a turbulent wave. In the blink of an eye, the surface of the clouds bulged and formed a huge hill of water vapor. With a loud splash, the cloud layer that was supposed to be in a gaseous state suddenly turned into a liquid state in the blink of an eye. The clouds below turned into a sea that stretched to the horizon. Seeing that the sky had turned into the horizon, Duke was tongue-tied. Indeed, it was too stupid to focus on science or reason in the spiritual world. This huge lake that seemed to have as much water as the Lordaeron Mill Lake next to the Lordaeron capital seemed to have gathered together in just 3 seconds. A pair of incomparably huge arms made of pure lake water stretched out from the huge hill of water. Then, an eye that was even bigger than a carriage lit up on the huge hill of water. It was a water elemental that was even bigger than a titan. As the saying went, gentle as water. Sorry, this thing's temper did not seem to have the so-called gentleness of water at all. Instead, it was even more irritable than the fire dragon. It did not even shout, "Go to hell." With a wave of its arm, it smashed its arm toward Duke like a flying axe. Due to the problem of vision, as long as the distance was far enough, even the largest thing would still be small. Visually, the water elemental giant was only the size of a palm. However, When the water arm that was bent at a right angle approached, Duque could clearly estimate the size of the water ball in a real sense. He immediately cursed in his heart. This was a huge water weapon that was more than 50 meters long on one side and shaped like a boomerang. Duque could not think of how to describe this thing, but he was extremely sure that even if this thing did not cause fatal damage to him in the first attack, it would kill him in the subsequent second attack. That's right. A drop of water was nothing to a human. But to an ant it was enough to drown the ant. Right now, Duque was that ant. As a water elemental creature, it would definitely drown Duque in its most proficient water manipulation skill. Perhaps some people would say, would Duque drown now that he was a spiritual entity? Duque didn't know, but Duque's intuition told him that once he was hit, he would be done for. Dodge? Was dodging useful? It was impossible to estimate how many water elements were born after the sea of clouds turned into water. In Duque's peripheral vision, there were water elementals in the shape of muscular men showing off their prowess on the surface of the water around him. It was as if God had filled the entire reservoir with water and poured it down on Duque's head. The impact of the giant water boomerang was even more frightening than the collapse of a mountain. At this moment, Duque flipped out. Do you think I'm a sick cat if I don't show my might? Duque didn't even know how many times the frost circuit in his body had spun. He only knew that it spun faster and faster. In the end, it became a shadow that the naked eye couldn't keep up with. Since this is the spiritual world. Since, Crown of Ice, wants to test me and show me how powerful you are. Since you, as a magic circuit, think that you can dominate such an awesome person like me, then show me your value. Duque seemed to be talking to himself, but also seemed to be putting pressure on, Crown of Ice, through some sort of declaration. Extreme cold wave. Duque punched the stairs under his feet. Instantly, an unparalleled cold aura formed a fan shape and blasted toward the water boomerang. The moment before the collision, the boomerang folded into a piece and turned into a flat, crescent-shaped water blade. However, after the water blade and the extreme cold wave collided, there was an earth-shattering explosion. This was the collision of water and ice. Water did not have enough volume to destroy or devour everything like a raging wave. Instead, it was the cold aura that caused the water to change first. The huge water blade was broken by the ice chi, and the water that burst out didn't even have time to pour down to form a waterfall before it was frozen by the ice chi into sharp icicles and shot into the distance. It went straight for the water elemental giant that had thrown its arm out. The icicles pierced through the giant and nailed it to the ground. This should not be counted as nailing it to death. This was because the cold aura turned the entire giant into an ice sculpture that was as huge as a mountain. The corners of Duque's mouth curled up into a smile of understanding. Since this can be done, then, at this moment, the huge water elemental giants around him went crazy. They no longer attacked individually. Instead, they dipped their arms into the lake together. In just a few breaths' time, Duque suddenly realized that the water giants had joined forces to set off an apocalyptic tsunami that engulfed the entire world. This was an apocalyptic tsunami in the truest sense. From the surface of the lake all the way to the sky, the vast and invincible seawater occupied Duque's entire field of vision. If he was an ordinary mortal, he would not even be able to imagine how he would break through it. Perhaps the only outcome would be to wait for death. Let this tsunami of despair destroy Duque's spirit. But who was Duque? A transmigrator. He had seen countless disaster movies, seen the White House that had been destroyed n times, and seen the Statue of Liberty that had been smashed n+1 times. Would he take this level of intimidation seriously? Tilting his head slightly, Duque spat out the words with a smirk, Ice Age? The ice circuit had formed an independent small universe in Duque's body. The cold aura inside was constantly splitting and multiplying like atomic fission. From 1 to 2, from 2 to 4, from 4 to infinity. Duque merely stomped his foot, and a cold aura that was even more terrifying than the apocalyptic tsunami instantly swept the entire world. When the huge wave arrived, there should have been a loud rumble caused by the vast body of water, but now there was only the sound of rapid freezing. The white wave quickly slowed down and advanced. The huge wave that should have been like a black hole or a whirlpool was still advancing. However, at the top of the wave, there were even more huge ice blocks that were as large as mountains. The ice blocks were churning, but when the ice blocks collided with each other, only ice crystals were scattered. The flowing water body became less and less. Finally, after 20 seconds, the roar of heaven and earth gradually subsided. What appeared in front of Duque was a frozen and dead world. At this moment, everything suddenly disappeared. The surroundings turned into a pitch-black void, and a pure white and gorgeous crown appeared in front of Duque. A magnetic neutral voice said, "Wear me, and I will grant you the supreme power of ice." Chapter 290. After going through so many hardships, traversing almost endless stairs, overturning a huge amount of water elements, he finally arrived in front of the crown of ice, and was bestowed with the power of ice. Well, if Duque was really born and raised in Azeroth, he might have eagerly put on the crown. Unfortunately, Duque wasn't. At this time, whoever wore it would automatically have the aura of a moron. Not only would it be a trap for himself, but it would also trap others. Oh, a demon from the crack of space and time. I don't know what you are. But if you want to trick me, it's too simple. Duque laughed coldly. That's right. The crown of ice was a magic circuit model, and it was impossible for it to have so many twists and turns. The only explanation was that something had snuck into Karazhan and was lying in ambush in this place with the most arcane energy, waiting for its prey to take the bait. It was very likely that it wasn't its main body, because if it was its main body, it wouldn't be able to hide from Khadgar and Duque's defense and alarm circles. But a trace of a soul was a different story. This was Karazhan, located above the crack in the astral plane. It wouldn't be strange for anything to sneak in. After all, Duque didn't have enough power and time to completely clean up this place. Fortunately, Duque had always been vigilant. In the next instant, the crown of ice suddenly had a master. A lich whose lower body was floating in the air like a few flower petals, and her upper body was covered in chains that kept spinning back and forth. She wore a purple, black and red magic robe, and her skull was in the shape of a skull. She used her claws to wear the crown of ice. For some reason, this evil existence that appeared in Duque's spiritual world was a little familiar. Beside her, a group of warriors with purple eyes, wearing black and purple heavy armor, and a large group of people in purple and black robes, who were neither human nor ghost, all knelt on one knee and placed their left hands on their chest, showing their utmost respect to the current owner of the crown of ice. Mortal, you don't understand the power and terror of the Burning Legion at all. Do you think that temporarily trapping the great commander Sargeras will stop the Burning Legion from conquering the world of Azeroth? You're too naive. Nothing can stop the Burning Legion, not even the Creation Titans. Not to mention an ant like you. You have obstructed the Burning Legion time and time again, and you even intend to support the resistance to unite. You are seeking your own death. I am the daughter of Frost, the incarnation of death, the great dead speaker. 7 gigantic ice-blue magic circles spread out with her palm as the center. One was directly behind her, and the other 6 were distributed in a hexagonal pattern. As soon as she finished speaking, the magic array trembled inexplicably. Bang! Countless icicles shot out from the center of the magic array, and pierced through Duque's entire body with ease. Duque was like a chicken wing waiting to be roasted, waiting for the Death Whisper Lady to judge his fate. Duke Marcus. Lady Death Whisperer's voice stopped for a moment. How heavy is the sin of stopping the burning legion? You should have been roasted by the flames of hell for 10,000 years. But on account that you are young and ignorant. So I'll give you a chance. Submit to me, or your soul will suffer eternal torture. At this moment, Duque, who was supposed to be dying, suddenly raised his head. There was an indescribable straightforwardness on his face, and his eyes flashed. Fool, if I'm really frightened by an illusion of your level in my spiritual world, I might as well drown myself in a bucket of tofu. Impudent. Lady Deathwhisper was furious. She summoned an iceberg and threw it at Duque. However, Duque did not even blink. It was as if he was waiting for the iceberg to crush him. He raised his right hand at lightning speed and grabbed the peak of the iceberg. The next second, the iceberg disappeared, and in its place was an ice-colored whip that extended from Lady Deathwhisper's hand to Duque's. I've caught you. Duke's face was filled with joy, as if he had succeeded. With a light tug, he tore the illusion into pieces. The terrifying collapse extended from the whip to Lady Deathwhisper, and even the believers and zealots around her. Ah, no, Lady Deathwhisper let out an earth-shattering scream, and then she and her minions all began to disintegrate. Like a weathered statue, every part of their body, every cell, turned into sand and quickly dissipated into the void. At the same time, a strong fluctuation suddenly came from the void portal on the first level of Karazhan. An ice chain that came from somewhere inside Karazhan suddenly whipped fiercely, pulling out an ice-blue female demon that was 2 people tall from the void portal. Michael, the Einherjar, immediately drew his sword from his waist, raised it high, and shouted, "Enemy attack!" At the same time, Duque's voice came from the Karazhan space. Khadgar, take care of her. As you command, Khadgar said politely, which was rare for him. Then there was the tragic story of a group of Einherjars, a Einherjar mage, and a boss named Curator, beating up another boss who didn't bring any minions and relied on them for food. Duque didn't care. He didn't even want to know why Lady Deathwhisper, the boss that should only appear in Ice Crown Fortress in the future, suddenly appeared here. And why Lady Deathwhisper was now just a demon. The things that appeared in the astral plane rift had no logic or science to begin with. If he continued to investigate, he would only become mentally ill. When Duque found that he was connected to the system elf again, the construction of the ice circuit magic model in his body was back on track and under control. Duque looked inside his body through the system. Now, his magic circuits were finally starting to look decent. Each huge circuit had countless thin, thread-like circuits. They were like a bundle of wires tied into a circle, and the countless small circuits formed a huge circuit. The 3 huge circuits of ice, fire, and arcane were like 3 connected rings. They were connected to each other and had their own independent sides, but sometimes they complemented each other. Although Crown of Ice and Phoenix Flames could directly draw power from the elemental realm, they also relied on the most core arcane circuit to support them. Before practicing Crown of Ice, only the arcane and fire circuits of Duque were relatively strong. If he used too much ice magic, it would lose its strength. Now, it was completely different. Now that there were 3 circuits, it was truly a trident. A surging and indescribable power rose from Duque's chest. This power was different from any power that Duque had encountered before. Not only was it stronger, more refined, and purer, but it was also more independent. Could it be that this was a morning star? Chapter 291. Duque had already touched that boundary. For the first time, the boundary between a sky wizard and a morning star wizard was clearly presented in front of Duque. Duque knew that as long as he continued to push hard, this boundary would collapse in front of him. However, Duque hesitated. Not enough. Not enough. This was Duque's intuition. Some people said that intuition might not be reliable. As a cultured university student, Duque had once seen an introduction like this. Some people might feel that something is wrong at some point, but their rationality told them that there was nothing wrong. However, the alarm in their hearts would ring. Why was that? In fact, this was the brain sending out an alarm to the core of one's rationality based on certain information from the past. The brain would judge that something was wrong from the visual and other sensory signals it received. For example, when thunder was about to strike, one's hair would stand on end, and one's scalp would feel numb. In fact, the brain had already sent out an alarm. If one still did not believe in this kind of intuition, one would be courting death. Now, it was the same for Duque. The crown of ice was clearly fine, so why did he not continue? In his brain, alarm bells rang incessantly. Duque almost stopped the high-speed flow of the 3 magic circuits at the last moment, stopping at the last moment that he could stop the upgrade. System Elf, help me analyze this. If I want to fully unleash the power of the frost or flame circuits, will there be any problems? The System Elf replied, beep. After testing, there are no problems. On the current basis, the Crown of Ice and Phoenix Flames circuits can both unleash their respective effects perfectly. Wait. Something doesn't seem right? Each? Wait. System. What if I want to unleash the power of the frost and flame circuits at the same time? Flame and frost are conflicting elemental abilities. It is strongly recommended that the host not use these 2 elements at the same time. I insist. Calculate it for me, Duque shouted. Host, this is not scientific. At this moment, Duque finally vaguely felt what was wrong. Bullsh *T. In this fantasy world, not every scientific principle makes sense. Mages have the awesome spell Frostfire Arrow. Beep. Beep. After simulation, host, your arcane circuit is unable to meet the output requirements of 2 top-level magic circuits at the same time, and there will be an unstable state. Beep. After calculation, you can only unleash 66.7% of the Frostfire Arrow's power at full power. Duque slapped his forehead, his back drenched in cold sweat. He must have been out of his mind to have forgotten about this. That's right, these 2 top-level magic circuits were complete. 100 points of fire was supported by 150 points of arcane circuits. Similarly, 100 points of frost could also receive this support. Perhaps the arcane circuit that matched Phoenix Flames wasn't perfect, but it could still hold on. The crux of the matter was that it was impossible for an arcana circuit of 150 points to sustain 100 points of fire and 100 points of frost at the same time. Considering the surplus, it was necessary to have at least 250 points of arcana circuit. If he really wanted to become the magic god of 3 practitioners of magic that he dreamed of, he had to further optimize and upgrade the arcane circuits that were the basic suppliers. This wasn't going to be easy. Duque didn't know if Medivh had recorded a magic model of this level. He probably had, but where was it? Was it recorded in the legendary artifact, Book of Medivh? F***ck. Medivh didn't mention it when he died. Duque's face turned green on the spot. Did this thing not exist in this world? Or did Medivh deliberately leave behind a thought or a backup plan? Or did he leave it in the library? Hell, the Karazhan library contained 1.28 million magic books. If he could let the System Elf scan it, it wouldn't be a problem to find it after reading it. But these were all magic books. The weaker ones could be scanned directly. The stronger magic books all came with their own magic restrictions. Duque did have the authority to open them, but he could only open them one by one. Otherwise, the magic books would trigger the restrictions and self-destruct. At this time, Khadgar returned. In his hand was a blue ball of light. Inside it was a struggling and howling soul. "Oh, my master, I haven't seen you for 2 months. Why did you provoke this thing the moment you woke up? Although she's only 1/3 of a demon's soul, she's not easy to deal with. My brothers are all slightly injured. Wait. You said 2 months? What time is it now? Didn't you say that the Alliance changed the year of the Beastmen invasion to the first year of the Dark Portal? Then it's the second year of the Dark Portal, February 10th. Oh, I saw that you were immersed in your own spiritual world, seeking a breakthrough, so I didn't dare to disturb you. Although your disciples have been looking for you many times. Duque's face turned green. He didn't think that he would stay in the spiritual world for more than 2 months. In March, spring would bloom. At that time, he would have to devote himself to the war with the Beastmen again. He wouldn't have time to cultivate at all. Was he going to be stuck as a sky mage for another year? A low level of strength meant a greater risk. Duque gritted his teeth, his lips almost bleeding. Seeing Duque's ashen face, Khadgar cowered. He immediately discovered that Duque's aura was still at the Sky Mage rank. Although he was very close to the Morning Star realm, he hadn't crossed that line. Could it be that Duque had failed to break through to the Morning Star realm? This time, it was Khadgar's turn to be unable to remain calm. Ugh, venting his anger was the most terrifying. Not daring to touch Duque's bad luck, Khadgar hurriedly said, Master, this fellow's soul is here. If you're unhappy, you can just roast her soul to vent your anger. How about I let you kill the imprisoned demon for fun? Duque was amused by Khadgar's words. Bastard, do you think I'm such an unreasonable person? If I want to advance to the Morning Star realm, I can do so at any time. This situation isn't ideal, so I'm just suppressing myself. Oh. Khadgar patted his chest, looking as if he had been relieved of a huge burden. Alright, let me see if this fellow has any information. Duque stretched out his hand, using arcane energy to suck up 1/3 of Lady Deathspeaker's soul. Duque couldn't analyze the information within the soul, but the system elf could. By repeatedly reading the Eridar demon language floating in the shallow layer of the soul, Duque finally found what he wanted. He was suddenly ecstatic. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Old Antonidas, you deserve to be beaten up by me. Ha ha ha. All of Karazhan reverberated with Duque's unbridled laughter. Chapter 292. The Dark Portal Year 2, 11th of February. In the Dalajan, Antonidas was feeling very angry. That's right, after he was cursed by Gul'dan last year, he was the first to study the power of curses. However, as more information on Orc Warlocks and Orc Death Knights was brought to the Dalajan, Antonidas suddenly realized that this was a taboo that humans should not touch. In the middle of last December, after an emergency discussion by the 6-member Kirin Tor Council, they voted 5-1 to seal all information on necromancy. They sealed everything and locked it in the Violet Library. They announced this decision to the entire Dalajan. The matter should have ended there, but in early January, Antonidas received a report that zombies were found in the frozen fields near the Dalajan. It was obvious that this was the work of a mage. Although the experimental subjects were just lab rats, these zombified animals caused the farmers around them to feel very uneasy. It also affected the reputation of the Dalajan mages. Antonidas ordered the mages to investigate this matter thoroughly, but to no avail. There could only be 2 reasons. 1. The person who did this was so clever that he could hide from the surveillance of the entire Dalajan and even the Kirin Tor Council. 2. This person was most likely a high-ranking mage in the Dalajan who used his power to hide everything. In his office, Antonidas glared at his secret agent. Necromancy must be banned. It was very simple. Although the Dalajan also had a school of necromancy, the mainstream values of human society rejected the existence of necromancy. Therefore, it was inevitable that the mages who were obsessed with necromancy were incompatible with the values of the Daligen. Antonidas could not ignore the opinions of the majority for the sake of a single mage's experiment. At this time, the guard brought news of Duque's visit. "Tell him that I'm busy." Previously, when Duque poached a large group of mages, he did receive a large number of unique magic books. However, they were all toy magic books with no practical value. There wasn't even a single valuable book that slipped through the net. There was a saying, "When the water is too clear, there are no fish." Obviously, Duque had gone through a strict selection process. Antonidas looked like he had been tricked, and now Duque was here again. The guard showed an awkward expression, "But Sir Marcus wants me to tell you that this is a matter of great importance to the Daligen's 1,000-year reputation and survival." Antonidas was shocked. He had dealt with Duque before. Of course, he knew that Duque was not the kind of person who did not know what was important. If he could say such serious words, it could only prove that Duque really had something important to tell him in person. "All of you, get out and let Duque in." Soon, only Antonidas was left in the room. Duque pushed the door open and entered. "Marcus, your information better be as important as you say it is. Otherwise, I won't forgive you. Of course, if you are a friend of the Daligen will definitely not be stingy in returning the favor." This was Antonidas' little trap. If Duque asked for a return, then it was definitely not a big deal. It also proved that Duque was not sincere enough. Duque waved his hand, "It doesn't matter what the return is. What matters is what I show you. Look." Duque took out a soul imprisoned in a magic device. After quickly reading the information in the soul, Antonidas' face suddenly changed. She didn't mention who it was. This may also be a false accusation. "No, it just so happens that I know who he is." Duque took a deep breath. "Sorry, in fact, I have a talent, the talent of detect evil. When I first saw Mediv, I found that there was a powerful demon possessing Mediv. At that time, I kept silent because I had no evidence, and even if I said it, no one would believe me." Antonidas was silent for a moment. He knew about the battle between Duque and Mediv. Why was it that so many people could not find out that Mediv was possessed, but Duque found out? This was a mystery that no one had solved. Now, Duque solemnly told him that everything he said was true. This gave Antonidas a bad feeling. "In fact, before I came, I took the opportunity to visit some high-ranking Daligen mages, and I finally found my target." Antonidas' face was already frosty. "Duke Marcus, do you know what you are saying?" "I know what I am saying. I want to invite the Archbishop of the Holy Light, Alonsus Fail, here. He will provide evidence for my accusations. But before that, I strongly suggest that you contact the two counselors, Crasus and Kale. You are indeed powerful, but even you can't guarantee that you will be able to keep him here." "All right." On the 12th of February, Kirin Tor Chairman Antonidas summoned all the Kirin Tor counselors and reserve counselors. "For the upcoming war with the orcs, we need to meet again to discuss the arrangements." It was a very reasonable reason. No one suspected that there would be any problems. But when all the counselors arrived at the magic conference floating in the sky above the Daligen city, they suddenly realized that the situation was a little strange. For daily affairs, the 6-member council was the highest decision-maker. Unless it concerned the life or death of the Daligen, or a change in the council, there would not be any backup counselors. This time, the 3 backup counselors sat in the spectator seats. When everyone had arrived, the Archbishop of the Holy Light, Alonsus, the Alliance's Deputy Commander Duque, and Paladin Uther arrived, filling the conference room with an ominous feeling. The magic circuits in Antonidas' body circulated, surging mana spilling out of his body. The temperature of the entire conference room dropped by a full 10 degrees. The aged Breaking Dawn wizard slammed his hands on the magic table in front of him, causing a loud bang to ring out. First of all, please take off your masks. As the chairman, I, Antonidas, declare that we do not need these things today. Although they did not know why, they still did as they were told. They were not supposed to take off their magic masks in front of outsiders. The 3 backup counselors, 2 men and 1 woman, were all passers-by that Duque did not know. Antonidas placed his hands on the table, exuding an aura like that of a ferocious tiger. His voice shocked everyone present. There is a traitor among us. A traitor who colludes with the devil. Once these words were spoken, there was an uproar. Devil. Kale, that's and a few others stood up in shock. What the hell? There was actually a traitor who colluded with the devil in the Kirin Tor Council. Chapter 293. In the Tirisful Council, whose purpose was to fight against the demons and prevent mages from casting spells excessively, all the counselors were selected from the Silver Moon Council and the Kirin Tor Council. It could be said that these 2 councils were the vanguard of fighting against evil, and the stronghold of justice. Now, Antonidas publicly announced that someone in the Kirin Tor Council was colluding with the demons. Everyone's first reaction was that it was impossible. The next second, everyone's reaction was, this could really be true. If it wasn't to fight against the demons, why would they invite the Archbishop of Holy Light and the leader of the Paladins? Enough. Let the facts speak for themselves. Antonidas' angry beard calmed down a little, and he turned to look at the Archbishop of Holy Light. Archbishop Fail, please. Fail didn't refuse. Destroying evil is one of my lifelong wishes. Under Uther's protection, he walked to the center of the council hall and put his hands together. Suddenly, a dazzling, holy star rose from the Archbishop's hands, and the holy light spread across the entire council hall. However, 1 second passed, 2 seconds passed, 10 seconds passed, and nothing happened. There were no screams of the demons, no leakage of evil energy, nothing at all. Archbishop Alonso's and Uther were a little stunned. They had been informed by Duque and Antonidas, and that was why they specially came here to subdue the demons. Now, there was nothing at all. A drop of cold sweat dripped from Antonidas' forehead, and he couldn't help but look at Duque. It was because of Duque's exposure of Sargeras possessing the Mediv that Antonidas had almost unconditional trust in Duque. Now that there was a demon, but they couldn't find it, wasn't this a great embarrassment? Of course, Duque deserved to die, but his authority as the chairman would also be greatly weakened. For a moment, Antonidas' relationship with Duque almost changed from trust to hatred. At this time, Duque slowly stood up and said in a calm voice, "There is no doubt that the demons are among us. I just want to tell everyone that times are advancing, and so are our old enemies, the demons. 10,000 years ago, would anyone have thought that the Demon King would stoop to possess a human guardian?" Everyone's body shook simultaneously. Indeed, everyone was a little unhappy that Mediv had tricked the entire human race. Duque's words made everyone even more vigilant. Duque spoke again, "Curse. An entirely new form of evil. The Undying." It was a non-living form that he had never seen before. The appearance of these 2 things is exactly what we need to be wary of. Therefore, when traditional demonic techniques are no longer effective, Archbishop Fao, please research new detection methods. Even though Duque had yet to prove that he was wrong, the meticulous Fail, who never lacked a sense of justice, nodded in agreement. In the human heart, there is rarely absolute justice or absolute evil. Therefore, the demons use this to deceive the detection of the holy light and achieve the purpose of infiltrating humans to continue spreading evil and undying beliefs. Actually, Archbishop, all you have to do is add the holy light into the spiritual attack. Fazio understood immediately. With a flip of his palm, waves of holy light once again spread throughout the entire hall. This time, one of the counselors finally bent over in pain. The skin on Kel Thuzad's poker face cracked inch by inch, revealing the pale, lifeless skin underneath. Even though Antonidas already knew the answer from Duque, he was still shocked speechless when he saw it with his own eyes. Beside Kel Thuzad, Prince Kale That's and Krasis, who were already prepared, instantly opened up their defensive shields. One on the left and one on the right, they attacked together and blasted out more than 100 fireballs, shattering Kel Thuzad's magic shield into pieces. At the same time, Wuther also attacked. The strongest paladin in history raised his hand and cast Divine Sanction. This broke through Kel Thuzad's magic defense and directly hit his evil soul. The world spun around him. Kel Thuzad didn't even have time to summon his evil creatures before he was struck in the face by Wuther the Fierce. Like a high-flying ball in a baseball, Kel Thuzad's body flew up under the bombardment of the divine hammer. Unfortunately, he didn't fly very far. His body only rose about a meter high before he was bounced back by an ice wall behind him. Humph! That was Antonidas' attack. He was caught off guard and was completely caught off guard. In addition, Antonidas' strength was not inferior to his at all. In fact, his strength was far above his. In the future, the Great Frost Lich, one of the strongest fighters under the Lich King, Kel Thuzad, was now like a little girl being molested by a few strong men. He had no strength to fight back. He was stepped on by Wuther, his hammer pressed against his head, and his body was continuously sealed by Krasis and Kale That's. At this moment, Kel Thuzad was no different from the most useless skeleton soldier. He also knew that he was definitely finished, so he let go of everything. Why? How did you know, Duke Marcus, that I gave up my life to pursue eternity? I only transformed myself into a lich last week. Even that female demon didn't know that I did it. She thought that I was just a degenerate with a soul. Why? Tell me. Why? Duque gently pointed at his own eyes. Just like how I saw through Sardra's possession of Mediv, I also saw through you. I have a pair of eyes that can see through the souls of degenerates who have been corrupted by demons. When the dust settled, Antonidas also walked forward. Kel Thuzad. I've always thought highly of your talent. If not, I wouldn't have agreed to let you become one of the Kirin Tor counselors. I warned you, Kel Thuzad. Don't carry out those forbidden necromancy spells. How did you do it? On the surface, you promised me, but behind my back, you were still secretly carrying out your necromancy experiments. When Duque told me, the first thing I thought of was you. But, until the moment the truth was revealed, I only believed it. Antonidas' shoulders rose and fell rapidly. He turned his head, and there was an unconcealable sadness in his eyes. He looked at Fail, Wuther, and Duque. I'm sorry that such a thing actually happened in the Dalajan Kirin Tor counselors. I'm deeply sorry. For the sake of the Dalajan's reputation, please keep this a secret. Kel Thuzad, we will deal with it, and we will definitely give everyone a satisfactory answer. Now, it's time for the Kirin Tor counselors. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.